Chapter 851. On the other side, Li Sai received the order and immediately began to reorganize the army. Speed was of utmost importance in war. Be it in his previous life or now, the invincible great general had always been conscientious and devoted to his duty. And with 5,000 Wuxian cavalry armed to the teeth suppressing them, none of the Hu soldiers dared to move. Suki, check the casualties of the Hu army. Wang Chong looked around the battlefield and said faintly, "Yes, Marquis." Behind him, Suki grunted in acknowledgement and flew off. In terms of administrative matters, Suki was undoubtedly an expert. After a short while, Suki returned and flew back. "My lord, the Qixi Protectorate has lost a total of 4 Hu generals, 150 Hu cavalrymen, and 8,700 heavily injured, and countless lightly injured." Towards the end, Suki's voice slowed down and became much softer. Although they had succeeded in defeating the rebel Hu army of the Qixi Protectorate and subduing them, the price of this battle had been far too high. More than 8,700 people were seriously injured. Suki stole a glance at Wang Chong. He was a little worried. If this news were to reach the imperial court, it would be very disadvantageous to Wang Chong. After all, the Qixi Protectorate only had tens of thousands of people. It's only 150 men, that's enough. Suki, prepare a memorial and report this matter to the imperial court. Unexpectedly, after hearing Suki's words, Wang Chong looked relaxed. He even heaved a sigh of relief, as if he didn't care at all. Wang Chong knew what Suki was thinking. He glanced at him and smiled faintly. "Don't worry, nothing will happen. Just do as I say." Wang Chong was born in a family of generals and ministers, so he had a lot of contact with military affairs. Although the Hu of the Qixi Protectorate had suffered many casualties in today's battle, with more than 8,700 heavily wounded, the imperial court would only pay attention to those 150. As for the 8,700 people, no one cared about them at all. In the military, being heavily injured and dying were two completely different concepts. Heavily injured people would recover after a period of time, but the dead would not come back to life. Not even the imperial court or the Holy Emperor would have anything to say about pacifying the chaos in Qixi, with only 150 casualties. This was what Wang Chong had planned from the very beginning. "Everyone else, follow me." With a wave of his hand, Wang Chong led the others through the battlefield toward the Qixi Protectorate headquarters. The war was over, and Wang Chong's entire focus was on the huge building in front of him. "I finally see it." Wang Chong gazed at the building in front of him. In truth, he had passed by the Qixi Protectorate headquarters several times, but because of Fomin Linta, Wang Chong had never gotten too close. The closest he had come to this Protector General's hall was the night he had dealt with the Black Wolf Yabgu, but Wang Chong had never gotten so close. Wang Chong carefully examined the massive structure before him. The entire hall was 10 samzhong tall, forged from bronze, refined iron, gold, silver, and deep-sea Xian iron. The hall was majestic and magnificent, both magnificent and dignified. But what Wang Chong was paying attention to was the surface of the hall, the countless sabers, spears, swords, and halberds, as well as the traces of battle. Wang Chong could sense the deep scars of history left behind by the erosion of time. The Qixi Protectorate had not been established recently. If one carefully traced it back to the era of Emperor Taizong, a very long time ago, Fomin Linta was also far from being the first Protector General of the Qixi Protectorate. Before him, this place had been overseen by generation after generation of Protector Generals, each of them renowned on the western border. Each of them had left their own deep imprints on this place. And after a long time, the Qixi Protectorate had welcomed its first Han Protector General. Su Shixian, go get the Qixi Protectorate's roster. Investigate all the servants, maids, and laborers of the Qixi Protectorate. Keep those who can stay, and send away those who can't. In addition, at this point, Wang Chong suddenly paused, a faint smile appearing on his lips. In addition, you can have Su Yiqing come in. With these words, Wang Chong strode into the hall. The floor of the Qixi Protectorate was made entirely of metal, and it was icy cold beneath his feet. But to Wang Chong, it felt very different. Ever since his reincarnation, This was the first time Wang Chong had set foot in the famed Qixi Protectorate of the western border. Wang Chong could sense that every inch of this hall was branded with the deep marks of authority. The tens of thousands of soldiers of Qixi, the nearby Qixi Armory, and the vital road to the Anxi Protectorate of the western regions were all controlled by this hall. In this life, this was the first time Wang Chong had set foot on such a high peak of authority. Tap, tap, tap. Wang Chong's footsteps were calm and unhurried, his footsteps echoing through the hall. Passing through the heavy metal door, Wang Chong finally saw the throne of authority in the center of the hall. Bang! A few moments later, the heavily armored Wang Chong stepped onto the throne, turned around, and sat down on the throne that represented the supreme authority of the Tang dynasty. Rumble! The moment Wang Chong sat down, all of Qixi trembled. Not many people realized that all of Qixi, including the western regions, had changed with Wang Chong's ascension to the throne of Qixi. At this moment, the course of history had begun to lead on a completely different path. I've finally succeeded. Starting now, I will protect the Tang dynasty. Seated on the throne of Qixi Protector General, Wang Chong gripped the armrests, sensing the power and authority that had settled down over the course of history, his mind rumbling with thunder. Qixi Protector General was the highest position of authority in the entire Tang dynasty. At this moment, only Wang Chong knew that he truly possessed the power to change this empire. In all of Qixi, Wang Chong was invincible. Flap flap. Several days after Wang Chong had taken complete control of Qixi, a messenger bird flew over the city. Ha ha ha, Wang Chong, this king truly did not misjudge you. I didn't think that you would be able to pacify Qixi so quickly. King Song heartily laughed as he read the letter from Qixi, his heart filled with relief. The king of Song had stood his ground against all opposition and recommended Wang Chong as Qixi Protector General. Only he himself knew just how much pressure he had been under. The imperial court, the holy emperor, and the people were all focused on him. Wang Chong's success or failure in Qixi was not only related to himself, but also to the king of Song in the distant capital. If the king of Song had made the wrong recommendation, and Wang Chong had failed to stabilize Qixi, the king of Song's prestige in the court would suffer a massive blow. Even the holy emperor would probably not value him as much in the future. But he hadn't expected that not long after the imperial court had issued the appointment, Wang Chong would be able to cleanly resolve all the unstable elements in Qixi. Moreover, he had only lost 150 Hu soldiers, a price that was almost negligible. Your Highness, it seems that child has completely matured. With him in Qixi, Your Highness will have nothing to worry about. This child truly did not disappoint Your Highness's efforts. The old steward bowed and said. He had also watched Wang Chong grow up. Who could have imagined that this youth of the capital who had needed his assistance in dealing with King Sojuram would now be able to stand on his own and sit on the most influential throne of the empire, completely replacing Fomin Linta. At this moment, even the old steward felt extremely gratified. Write a letter for me to Wang Chong. Tell him to focus on managing Qixi. If he has any requests, he can tell me. I will do my best to support him in the capital. That's right. I remember that not long ago, Wang Chong sent a memorial requesting that the city of Steel be used as a transit point for soldiers. I want to present this to the Holy Emperor. In addition, Qixi has been through a series of major battles. Look after the Bureau of Military Personnel for me, and prioritize the supply of soldiers to Qixi. The King of Song said. Yes, Your Highness. Time slowly passed, and after killing Gujilai, Wang Chong smoothly ascended to the position of Qixi Protector General. All the voices of resistance had been suppressed by Wang Chong. In addition, all the who had participated in the rebellion had been reorganized by Li Sai, and everything was on the right track. In the main hall of the Qixi Protectorate headquarters, a large sand table with talas at the center had been placed on display. Small flags of various colors had been inserted into the sand table. Wang Chong stood next to it, a small red flag in his hand, a pensive look in his eyes. Marquis, the Hu of Qixi are still unconvinced. A voice suddenly came from behind him. It was Sukui, dressed in martial attire, a hint of worry on his thick brow. Although we've already completely routed the Hu army of the Qixi Protectorate, killed Gujilai, and General Li has reorganized them, these who are still outwardly convinced, but their hearts are unconvinced. In the last few nights, there have been many disturbances. Although they've all been minor matters like stabbing horses, brawling, and small-scale destruction of provisions, your subordinate is worried that these who aren't very useful. At a critical juncture on the battlefield, there will be major chaos. Even Heba Yi can't be dealt with? Wang Chong indifferently said, not even turning his head. His eyes were still focused on the sand table before him. Heba Yi had arrived after the battle. Unlike the others, he had witnessed the Battle of the Triangular Gap, and was well aware of the terrifying fighting power of Wang Chong's 5,000 soldiers. When Gujilai had gathered the Hu generals to rebel, Heba Yi had been the only high-ranking Hu general who had not participated. Unlike the others, when Heba Yi arrived, he had immediately expressed his allegiance to Wang Chong and his respect for the imperial court's decision. Moreover, Wang Chong was well aware that this Qixi commander of the Uzun Plateau was completely different from Gujilai, and that he was loyal and reliable to the Tang dynasty. Thus, Wang Chong had decided to give Heba Yi command of the reorganized Hu army. Chapter 852. General Heba truly did manage to gather a considerable number of Hu soldiers, but there are also quite a few who are privately resentful and refuse to obey him. Suki whispered. Haha. Wang Chong chuckled as he casually planted the small red banner in the wilderness next to Talis. He then turned his head to Suki. It's for Fomin Linta, right? Yes. Suki lowered his head, his voice as soft as a mosquito's buzz. He had investigated the Hu rebellion in great detail, and the crux of the problem lay with Wang Chong, or more accurately with Fomin Linta. After operating in Qixi for so many years, Fomin Linta's prestige had soared like the noon sun, deeply rooted in the hearts of all the Hu soldiers. Gujilai's rebellion had been for this reason, and so had the unrest of the Hu soldiers. This was not something that a single Heba Yi could resolve. In truth, Suki had wanted to tell Wang Chong, but in the end, it was Wang Chong who had brought it up himself. Suki, you're taking this matter too seriously. It's just a few minor disturbances. They're not as capable as you think. In addition, I've already thought of a way to deal with those resentful Hu soldiers. Wang Chong indifferently said, his expression relaxed. Ah. Suki finally raised his head, a hint of surprise in his eyes. This problem had plagued him for a long time, but he had never been able to think of a way to resolve it. He couldn't kill those Hu, but he also couldn't not kill them. It was like a fishbone stuck in his throat. He had never imagined that Wang Chong would have a solution. Take this letter and send it to Biting Protector General in Sishan. I'm confident that he'll be happy to help us resolve this problem. As Wang Chong spoke, he took out a prepared letter from his bosom and handed it over to Suki's dumbstruck expression. My lord. Suki's eyes were dull, and his face was blank. He had no idea what Wang Chong's words meant. To have Biting Protector General in Sishan resolve this problem on their behalf, and take over those resentful Hu generals was simply too far-fetched. Will Lord and Sishan really be willing? Suki had an uneasy look on his face. If he remembered correctly, there was a significant rift between the Biting Protector General and Wang Chong. In the capital, Wang Chong had even clashed with him. Moreover, when Wang Chong marched into Qixi, that person from Biting had also been a fierce opponent. It was beyond Suki's imagination that Wang Chong wanted him to help him at this time. You don't need to worry about this matter. No matter what grudges I had with the Biting Protector General in the past, he will definitely agree to this. Wang Chong indifferently said, his voice brimming with confidence. Yes, Marquis. Although he was utterly confused, Suki still acknowledged the order and left. Flap, flap, flap. Several days later, a black falcon carrying Wang Chong's personal letter flew over the steppe, following the border between the Western Turks and the Tang dynasty, all the way to the most illustrious center of power in the north of the Tang dynasty, the Biting Protectorate. On the vast land, a huge black object stood. It was a war machine that was made up of countless sentry posts, barracks, towers, and a circle of walls that was 60 to 70 feet tall. as well as a huge metal palace. Thousands of black-armored soldiers of the Biting Protectorate stood between these sentry posts, barracks, and towers. These people all had their backs ramrod straight, as if they had taken root in the earth. They exuded powerful auras, and warily observed their surroundings, as if they were ready to enter the fray at any moment. In the entire Tang dynasty, the soldiers of the Biting Protectorate were definitely the most vigilant, as they were constantly facing attacks from the Turkic armies that came from unknown directions. Whoosh! With a gust of wind, the Black Falcon flew through the gate and into a gloomy hall. In the hall, a middle-aged Hu of about 30 was seated on a throne. His features were strong and chiseled, and he wore a suit of heavy armor. He was currently holding a black-covered scroll and reading it with rapt attention. When the Black Falcon flew into the hall, the resolute Hu did not seem to notice it. His attention was completely absorbed by the scroll in his hand. Biting was a land of war and frequent wars, and the Biting Protectorate, as the center of these wars, should have been brimming with a somber and frigid aura. But the presence of this middle-aged Hu gave the Biting Protectorate a thick and gentle scholarly aura, causing one to mistake this place for some residence in Jiangnan, and forget that this was actually the bitter northern steppe. Clang! A cold light flashed through the gloomy hall, as a stalwart figure strode forward, the sword at his waist unsheathed, and the gleaming tip of the sword accurately catching the Black Falcon. The Biting general with the scar on the left side of his face glanced at the falcon's feet, and his eyes widened, an indescribably strange expression on his face. After a moment's thought, the Biting general lifted the Black Falcon with his sword, and strode up to the middle-aged Hu diligently studying. He then respectfully bowed at the waist. "My lord, there is a letter, but your subordinate does not dare to open this letter." The scar-faced Biting general lowered his head and stared at the tip of his feet. In all of the northern steppe, only Protector General Sishun could inspire such respect from the bottom of his heart. "What, you don't dare to open it? As the Deputy Protector General of Biting, is there any letter that you can't open?" And Sishun grinned, not even raising his head. The only thing left in his eyes was the scroll in his hand. "My lord, I truly do not dare to open it, because the seal of Qixi is on it." The scar-faced Biting Deputy Protector General lowered his head as he spoke once more. "Oh!" And Sishun just smiled and didn't care. He even flipped a page. But soon Sishun immediately felt something. His thick eyebrows gradually furrowed, and his gaze also left the scroll. He slowly raised his head. "Qixi. Yes, it is Qixi," the scar-faced Biting Deputy Protector General respectfully said, knowing that his subordinate had understood. In the last few months, the entire Tang dynasty had experienced a major earthquake, and the structure of power that had remained unchanged for decades had undergone a massive change. A prince had fallen, many ministers had fallen, and a protector general had been imprisoned. And the Holy Emperor's fury had caused all the protector generals and great generals to tremble in fear. If Qixi was still the Fomenlinta of the past, he wouldn't have needed to ask the protector general's permission, and could have directly dealt with it. This had been in Sichuan's order. But now, all the protector generals and great generals of the empire knew that Qixi had a new master. His rise had been as intense as a storm, and it had been accompanied by the fall of a veteran great general. The new Qixi Protector General was definitely on the special list of all the Protector Generals and Great Generals. As a new official, his every move would attract the attention of everyone. No one had expected that his first letter would be to the Biting Protectorate. If he remembered correctly, he and the Protector General had not been good allies. "Let me see." And Sishun finally put down the black-covered scroll and extended his right hand, a hint of confusion in his eyes. He was also confused. There was no reason for this letter to have come at all. And Sishun took the falcon from the Deputy Protector General's hands and unwrapped the letter. With just a glance, his brow relaxed and he began to heartily laugh. "Interesting, far too interesting. I didn't think that the first day this new noble of the Tang dynasty would be to beg me." "Ah!" The scar-face Biting Deputy Protector General trembled, clearly rather surprised. "Beg? My lord isn't joking, right?" Whether it was in the past or his usual style, this new Protector General was an extremely unyielding person. If he wasn't unyielding, Fomenlinta wouldn't have been pulled down from his high horse. Given this person's personality, he would never ask for help, and besides, his lord had a grudge against him. It was unheard of to ask for help from an old enemy. Ha ha ha, I won't keep you in suspense. Take it. And Sishun flicked his finger, sending Wang Chang's letter flying into the hands of the scar-faced biting Deputy Protector General. Glancing at the contents of the letter, the Deputy Protector General was dumbfounded. I didn't think that he would so quickly pacify the Chishi Protectorate. He didn't even think about killing a person like Gujulai, and he even wants us to help him take in nearly 10,000 who's soldiers of the Chishi Protectorate. Begging is too much of an exaggeration. This person has no intention of begging at all. And Sishun indifferently said, flicking off his fingernails as he slowly stood up from his seat. He's just trying to negotiate with us. And it seems like he's certain that I'll agree. And Sishun smirked. This letter truly was very interesting. It could be said that he had never received a more interesting letter this year. A letter asking for help, but not the slightest attitude. Was there anything more interesting than this? This brat is a little too arrogant. What makes him think that we'll agree to his request? Moreover, he's been too arrogant recently. My lord, why don't I just refuse him, and let him learn his lesson? The Deputy Protector General said rudely as he narrowed his eyes. The young Marquis of the Chishi Protectorate was not a very popular lord in biting, and he had been so blunt in his request that he had been refused. Refuse? A pensive look appeared in Sishuan's eyes, and then he smiled and shook his head. Why should I refuse? My lord, you want to agree to his request. The scar-faced Deputy Protector General stood in the hall, his entire body frozen in shock, a look of disbelief on his face. This answer was definitely not within his expectations. At this moment, even if Ishbara Khagan of the Western Turks appeared in front of him, he would not be as surprised. This brat is our enemy. Chapter 853. Is it very hard to understand? And Sishun grinned and walked down from his throne. His expression was relaxed, his bearing exuding the aura of a strategist and brimming with energy. There is no such thing as a pure enemy or a pure friend. Whether it was Fomenlinta of the past or the young Marquis of the Tang dynasty, regardless of whether the tone in their letters is good or bad, if it's beneficial to us, we should naturally accept it. No matter how bad the tone, we don't care. If it's disadvantageous to us, we should naturally swiftly reject it. No matter how pleasant or tactful it is, we should still pretend that we didn't hear it. I've always underestimated that boy from Chishi. I always believed that he was just an ordinary man, who only knew how to stir up trouble. This sort of person, no matter how dazzling or how quickly he rose, would never be able to enter the eyes of me or Geshu Han. I didn't think that he would so quickly comprehend the rules of the game of the great general level, just a few days after taking the position of Chishi Protector General. I now admit that this boy truly does have the right to enter the elite game of the Empire on the same level as me, Geshu Han, and Zhang Shogui. And Sishuan's gaze pierced through the hall into the distance, a thoughtful smile on his lips. On the side, the scar-faced Vice Protector General was dumbstruck, his entire body frozen in shock. The elite game of the Empire. In all his years of following in Sishun, this was the first time he had learned of the secrets of the great general level. Don't think about it. Send a reply. Tell our new Chishi Protector General that the biting protectorate is short on manpower, due to the frequent battles, and truly does need reinforcements. Thus, I will be taking over his Hu soldiers. With these last words, and Sishuan's eyes exploded with an unprecedented and intimidating light. Yes, my lord. Several days later, in the Chishi Protectorate headquarters, Marquis, the biting Protector General has sent a letter saying that he will take as many of the Hu soldiers as we wish to deal with, no matter how many there are. Suki excitedly rushed into Wang Chang's hall, the letter in his hand still in disbelief. An Imperial Protector General like Sishun, one who had a grudge with his Marquis, was actually willing to help. Really? Wang Chang sat high above him. He raised his head slightly, and there was no surprise in his eyes. Write a reply to Sishun, and say that you got it. In addition, Tell him that the people the Qixi Protectorate doesn't want will be sent to him very soon. Wang Chang's tone was light and breezy, as if he had dealt with a trivial matter, or as if Sishan had done what he should have done a long time ago. Suki was stunned. In the end, he couldn't help but admire him from the bottom of his heart. Perhaps only their own marquis could do such a thing. Wang Chong just smiled faintly and lowered his head again. He continued to read the letter that Yang Hongchang had sent from the western regions, and said without raising his head, "You'll understand in the future. For now, let's talk to Hebayi first." The great generals and protector generals of the empire were rarely swayed by their personal emotions. Everything was based on the interests and the overall situation. This was the basic requirement of a general. If one couldn't do this, one couldn't be considered a qualified great general. However, this was only for great generals and protector generals of the same level. Without reaching this level, one had no right to participate in this game. In his last life, Wang Chong had been the Grand Marshal of the world and was honored as the war saint, so he naturally knew all of this. "Yes, Marquis." Suki only half understood and quickly left. Once Suki left, Wang Chong continued to read the letter in his hand. In the western regions, the Tang dynasty had always been short on soldiers because of the long distances. The soldiers of the western regions were far more elite than those of the other protectorates, so they had no other choice but to use a purely elite army. Just the soldiers of Qixi and Anxi were far from enough to resolve the future crisis. But the western regions had a unique advantage. It had a large number of soldiers that could be hired. As long as one had enough money, one could quickly gather a large number of soldiers. Wang Chang's letter was a request for Yang Hongchang's assistance in investigating the mercenary tribes of the western regions. Hebayi and Suki were far more efficient than expected. That very night, the tens of thousands of soldiers of Qixi began to reorganize. Those who were willing to stay could remain in the Qixi Protectorate, and those who were unwilling to follow the Han could submit to Hebayi's subordinates. And those who were unwilling to stay could go to the Biting Protectorate and submit to Sishan. Although Hebayi tried his best to stop this scene, he couldn't do anything about it. A melon that was forcefully picked would not be sweet. If they were unwilling to stay, then there was no point in forcing them to stay, and it would only lead to more unrest. Time slowly passed, and Wang Chang's change of blood in the Qixi Protectorate caused a massive upheaval in Qixi. This upheaval of leave or stay only began to subside at the Z period. Deep into the night, all was quiet. "We can't stay any longer." A low whisper could be heard in the darkness. It was not Hu, nor was it Chinese, but an even more complicated language. It was not even a common language in the western regions. "This new Han Protector General is too formidable. With just a simple interrogation, our identities will be exposed." Another low whisper could be heard. At the edge of the Qixi Protectorate's barracks, beneath the high fences, several figures were creeping on the ground, slowly moving through the darkness. They moved in a different direction from all the Han soldiers, as well as the Hu soldiers who were deployed to Biting, because they were moving in the northwest direction. "Hurry! We won't be able to leave once the sun rises. We have to report this to the governor, and have him raise his guard against this young Han Protector General. His cavalry is too powerful. In the future, they will definitely become a thorn in our side. I truly didn't think that there would be such a powerful army in the distant east. The governor will definitely treat this discovery with great importance." That as the few of them spoke softly, they swiftly used their scimitars to open up a passageway that could only allow one person to pass through, out of the line of sight of the sentries. The figures of these people shuttled, and with a strange posture, like swaying loaches, they drilled out of the passageway, sticking close to the ground. "All right, let's go." Once they were out of the barracks, the few of them heaved a sigh of relief. They immediately shrunk their bodies and dashed toward the northwest. However, before they could get far, a sudden change occurred. A loud shout suddenly came from the front. "Kill them all!" "Halt! Where are you going?" "There's a spy! Don't let them get away!" "Capture them!" "Dat poo-piu-piu!" With a flash of fire, a flurry of arrows streaked across the sky and landed not too far away from the few of them. following which, several torches were thrown over. In the dark night, one silhouette after another roared. Like wolves and tigers, they rushed out from various hidden places in the surroundings. Dee-da-da, the war horses neighed. The heavy hoofbeats were as dense as rain, as heavy as thunder, whistling as a flock of bees. In the blink of an eye, 30 to 50 Wuxian cavalry had charged out, all of them holding up torches that illuminated the area as bright as day, as well as those deserters, who were trying to sneak out of the camp under the cover of darkness. In the bright light of the torches, everyone could clearly see that these people had high noses, deep eyes, and prominent cheekbones. They looked very similar to the Hu, but they had deep green eyes that were completely different. Not just the Hu, but no one in the western regions had these eyes. The Arabs. Standing at the very front of the Wuxian cavalry, Su Qi was struck dumb. Behind him, the Wuxian cavalry had the same expression on their faces. There were only two kinds of people in the Qixi Protectorate, the Hu and the Han. They had received Wang Chang's order to patrol the perimeter and guard against scouts and spies from other factions. They had never imagined that they would catch a few Arabs who shouldn't even be here. And they were wearing the armor of the Qixi Protectorate. All was quiet in the light of the torches. The sight of the Wuxian cavalry and the other Qixi soldiers instantly made the Arabs turn ghastly pale. What? At daybreak, in the main hall of the Qixi Protectorate, Wang Chong finally revealed a look of shock upon hearing Su Qi's report. Arab spies have been discovered in the Qixi Protectorate, and they're disguised as Hu soldiers. Replying to Marquis, this is indeed the case. I sent someone to investigate, and all of them are recorded as Hu in the roster of the Qixi Protectorate. And based on the chronology, they began more than 6 months ago. Su Qi bowed, his face serious. As he spoke, he waved a hand behind him. Bring them in. Bang! Bang! Su Qi had barely spoken when several heavily armored Wuxian cavalry stepped over the threshold, each of them carrying a bound Arab soldier, and throwing him to the ground. Wang Chong gazed at these bulky Arab soldiers, his eyes finally turning grave. Wang Chong had seen Arab merchants before. In his past, when he was stubborn and incompetent, Wang Chong had interacted with them many times. Those Arab merchants were just as many people remembered them to be. Chubby, smiling, and adorned in gold and silver. Their fingers were covered in rings of agate and jade, making them look like clowns. But these Arabs were different. Their bodies were tall, well-proportioned and sturdy, as if they had been cast from steel, brimming with explosive strength. Moreover, the thick calluses on their hands indicated their status. These were not traveling merchants or merchants, but regular soldiers of the Arab army. Wang Chong had never imagined that he would meet a true soldier of the Arab army in this sort of situation. The Arabian Empire had always been an extremely powerful foe in Wang Chong's mind. Once he finished reorganizing the Qixi Protectorate and taking care of everything, Wang Chong would point his sword at the Arabs. Even if they didn't come, Wang Chong would definitely go and find them. But Wang Chong had never imagined that they had already extended their claws into the Qixi Protectorate and had even disguised themselves as Hu to infiltrate the army. Chapter 854. I ask you, who sent you? Wang Chong strode forward and stopped in front of the pair, his body exuding a powerful pressure. But several of the Arab soldiers turned their heads to the side and pretended not to hear, as if they didn't understand. Wang Chong only sneered. If these people could disguise themselves as Tang people soldiers and sneak into Qixi, they couldn't possibly not understand the language of the Han. Was it Abu Muslim? Wang Chong suddenly said. This time, he had spoken not in Chinese but in Arabic. Buzz! The Arab soldiers trembled at these words and turned their heads, their mouths agape as if they had seen a ghost. Wang Chong's heart sank at this sight. Abu Muslim was the Abbasid Caliphate's governor of the East, and also the Tang dynasty's greatest foe in the western regions. In the future Battle of Talas, this person would be the highest commander of the Abbasid Caliphate. Although these people had not answered his question, their reactions were more than enough to explain everything. I didn't think that his claws had already extended to this place. Wang Chong's heart was heavy. Wang Chong had a very limited understanding of the Abbasid Caliphate's governor of the East, the highest-ranking commander of the East. Wang Chong had always believed that he was the only one silently preparing to deal with the Arabs, but Wang Chong had never imagined that the Abbasid Caliphate's governor of the East had already dispatched scouts and spies to the Tang dynasty 6 months ago, and that their spies had already penetrated through Anxi to Qixi. In a flash, Wang Chong smelled the thick scent of war and conspiracy. Wang Chong suddenly realized that he had been far underestimating the Arab commander west of the Tsong Mountains. This Arab leader was far more frightening and difficult to deal with than he had imagined. You know the name of our Lord? Impossible. A Tang people like you actually knows how to speak our language. You should give up on that idea. No matter what you want to ask, we won't tell you. At this moment, the Arab spy who had been clenching his teeth this entire time finally spoke. The Arabic that Wang Chong had spoken, especially the words Abu Muslim, had given them a massive shock. They had been hiding in the Central Plains for so long, but this was the first time they had heard someone speak Arabic so fluently. Not even Fuming Lingxia, who was known to be able to accommodate all kinds of people, could do such a thing. In truth, there were very few people in the western regions who could speak Arabic. But what shocked them the most was that Wang Chong actually knew the name of their supreme commander. The distance between the Abbasid Caliphate and the Tang dynasty meant that the knowledge of both sides was limited. Moreover, the Abbasid Caliphate was even more guarded against outsiders than the Tang dynasty, and all information related to the army was treated as absolute secrets. Even the nearby kingdoms of the western regions probably had very few people who knew the name of their commander-in-chief. But this young Han protector general, who had never been to the Abbasid Caliphate, or even the western regions, was actually able to call out his name. This left the elite scouts of the Arabian Empire flabbergasted. There's no need to say more. You've already answered. Wang Chong indifferently said. Knowing the name Abu Muslim meant that Wang Chong already knew the vast majority of the secrets, so it didn't matter if he said the rest or not. Sukui, take them away. You can deal with the rest. Yes, Marquis. Suki understood and waved his hand. Several Wuxian guards immediately stepped forward and took the scouts away. The City of Steel had experts specialized in interrogations, all of them originally from the Bureau of Punishments, who had been transferred to the City of Steel through their connections with the Eagle. When Wang Chong entered the Qixi Protectorate, he had also brought these people with him. Even if these Arab scouts had been specially trained to keep their secrets, Suki was confident that he could pry out a few secrets from them if they clenched their teeth and refused to speak. The appearance of the Arab spy had aroused a great deal of attention from Wang Chong, and it had completely refreshed Wang Chong's understanding of the Arab commander, Abu Muslim. Just when Wang Chong was preparing to thoroughly investigate this matter, one day later, when everyone was still immersed in peace and tranquility, an eagle silently flew over from the distant western regions. But few people knew that the news brought by this eagle was like a meteor crashing into the ground, shaking the entire empire, and completely disrupting Wang Chong's rhythm. What? Gao Xianji attacked the Sher kingdom, killed its lord, and conquered the entire kingdom. Wang Chong was in the main hall of the Qixi Protectorate, reading through the documents of the Qixi Protectorate. When he heard this news, his body trembled like a bolt of lightning had struck his head, and he didn't even realize that the military document in his hand had fallen to the ground. At that moment, the entire hall fell into a deathly silence. The Battle of Talas. This was the only thought in Wang Chong's mind. How could this be? The Battle of Talas won't start for at least half a year. How could it be so soon? Wang Chong's face was pale, his mind in chaos. In order to prevent this war, he had put in a lot of effort. He had even written a letter to Go Xianji, stating the pros and cons of this matter. Wang Chong had originally believed that his letter would be of some use, at least enough to raise Gao Xianji's guard. As long as Gao Xianji was more cautious, he would never recklessly attack the Sher kingdom, like he did in his last life. The Battle of Talas would also be delayed, giving him plenty of time to prepare. But Wang Chong had never imagined that not only would the battle not be delayed, it would be brought forward by 6 months. Not only that, After Lord Gao Xinji conquered the Sher kingdom, he advanced westward, his 30,000 elites beating the Arabs to the city of Talis. Su Qi bowed, his expression grim as he sensed the gravity of the situation. But the Arabs quickly marched east, turning out all their forces to surround the city of Talis. The situation is grave and urgent. The commander of the 4 garrisons of Anxi, Feng Changqing, has already sent a letter requesting reinforcements. I request Marquis to make the decision. Buzz! Su Qi had barely finished speaking when he heard a boom that caused the entire hall to fiercely sway. Su Qi raised his head, but he quickly realized that this was no earthquake. Wang Chong had fiercely stood up from his seat. His aura surged, and his majestic astral energy filled the entire hall like waves. Even a blind person would be able to sense that Wang Chong's mind was extremely unstable. Marquis, Su Qi subconsciously called out. After following Wang Chong for so long, he had gained the impression that Wang Chong was always a strategist who always had a card up his sleeve. Even in the War of the Southwest, Wang Chong had never panicked. This was the first time Su Qi had seen Wang Chong lose his composure. Bring that letter over. Wang Chong's voice resounded through the hall. Yes. Su Qi stepped forward and respectfully handed over the letter requesting reinforcements from the Anxi Protectorate. I've already given the order. All the intelligence and information related to this battle will be delivered before dawn in 12 hours at most. This night was destined to be a sleepless one for the entire Qixi Protectorate. The hall was brightly lit, and Wang Chong uneasily paced back and forth. All the generals, whether they were Li Sai, Su Kai, He Yi, or Su Yiqin, had been summoned. By daybreak, all the information had been gathered. For this reason, Wang Chong had even personally written a letter to Feng Changqing, who had been left behind in the western regions, asking for the details of the matter. Wang Chong finally understood the truth behind this massive upheaval. Gao Xinji had led his army to attack the Sher kingdom, slaughtering its officials, and then crossing the Tsong mountains to advance west and occupy the city of Talis. In the end, he had been surrounded by the armies of the Arabian Empire. This series of events that had shaken the western border was far more complicated than imagined. Wang Chong's letter truly had been effective. Upon receiving it, Gao Xinji had become much more cautious. If everything went as expected, Gao Xinji would have to wait several months before attacking the Sher kingdom. But an unexpected piece of news had completely disrupted Gao Xinji's tempo, forcing Gao Xinji to take a series of swift actions, including attacking the Sher kingdom and crossing the Tsong mountains to occupy the city of Talis. The king of the Sher kingdom had colluded with the Arabs, and the two countries had agreed to work together to attack the Anxi Protectorate in a few months. This news had caused Gao Xinji to change his mind and strike first, triggering this massive upheaval. How could it be like this? Wang Chong gripped the letter and mentally sighed, unable to speak for a long time. Pull one hair and move the whole body. A butterfly flapped its wings, stirring up a storm and massive waves on the boundless sea. The current situation was completely different from what he had known. Wang Chong had always believed that Gao Xinji's sudden attack on the Sher kingdom would be the same as in history, a calamity brought about by greed. But after reading the reason for Gao Xinji's attack, not even Wang Chong could find a single word of blame. Wang Chong had never known that the Sher kingdom was colluding with the Abbasid Caliphate to deal with the Anxi Protectorate. Wang Chong also could not determine if this was because of some hidden information from his last life, or simply because of the butterfly effect. But there was one thing that he could be sure of. Once he confirmed that the other side was working together, he would strike first, taking the initiative to attack before the other side could fully prepare. This was the most correct method for a famed general. Gao Xinji's method could not be faulted, and if it were Wang Chong, he would definitely have done the same. And if Arabia was colluding with the Sher kingdom, once Gao Xinji captured the Sher kingdom, the Arabs would definitely send reinforcements. Rather than passively waiting, it was better to attack to the end. He could actively obstruct the Arabs, and he could also keep the war out of the country, lessening the effects of this war on the western regions. If everything went smoothly, after the war, the Sher kingdom could be incorporated into the Tang dynasty's western regions, which would only be beneficial to the Tang dynasty. From the western regions to the Abbasid Caliphate, beyond the Tsong Mountains, there was almost nothing but flat plains. From a military standpoint, the most strategic location in the region was undoubtedly the city of Talas. Gao Xianji was a famed general of his generation, famed for his blitzkrieg tactics. There was no doubt that he had keenly sensed the special value of the city of Talas. Thus, after capturing the Sher kingdom, he had marched 1,000 li to occupy Talas. This series of actions had been swift, vicious, and efficient, dealing the Sher kingdom a most painful blow. At the same time, it had caught the Arabs off guard and forced them into an extremely passive position, completely displaying the abilities of a top-class great general of the Tang dynasty. Chapter 855. Marquis, what should we do next? The hall was quiet as everyone stared at Wang Chong. Under Wang Chong's influence, all of them had extremely solemn expressions. In the past, they would have believed that Arabia was just an insignificant country and wouldn't have cared much about this battle. But as people who had personally experienced it, they were well aware of just what sort of enemy they were facing. This country had an even vaster territory than the Tang dynasty, an even larger army, stronger war horses, and a valiant ambition to expand its territory. This was the Tang dynasty's strongest foe on this continent. Gao Xianji had already led nearly 90% of the Anxi Protectorate army into the city of Talas, and behind him was a vast expanse of land. If Gao Xianji could not stop the soldiers the Arabian Empire had deployed to the east, tens of thousands of Arab soldiers would soon cross the Tsong Mountains and occupy the entire western regions. Qixi would bear the brunt of this assault. Once Qixi fell, all of Longxi and the interior of the Tang dynasty would be threatened. For the first time in history, the Arab army was at the gates of the Central Plains. Everyone would feel the intense threat of this distant country. All of them had clearly understood this point from Wang Chong's calculations on the sand table. Wang Chong said nothing, only closed his eyes and began to think. This battle had occurred too suddenly and too quickly. He needed to calm his mind and think. There were still too many preparations that had not been completed, and the sudden outbreak of the Battle of Talas had completely disrupted his plans. Li Sai, pass on my order. Open the Qixi armory. After some time, Wang Chong finally opened his eyes, which were bursting with a dazzling light. Boom! After a while, with a roar of steel, the long-sealed Qixi armory suddenly opened. Sunlight shone down and finally shone into the largest armory at the border. The ballistae, forged by the Ministry of Works and stamped with the imperial seal of the imperial court, finally saw the light of day after 10-some years of being covered in dust. Stop! You can't do this. Without a written order, no one is allowed to enter. Stop right now! Several guards of the Qixi armory shouted, but no one paid attention to them. As the saying goes, when a general is outside, the ruler's orders are not to be obeyed. Things can be done according to tradition, but they can also be done according to authority. As a general, one should be able to adapt to circumstances. Now that the war was imminent, these ballistae were the best weapons of war, able to maximize the power of the Tang dynasty. In the past, the successive generations of Qixi protector generals, including Fomin Linta, had all scrupulously abided by this rule, not daring to violate it. However, Wang Chong was different. He would not rigidly adhere to the old rules. Boom! As Wang Chong led his army into the Qixi armory, the Stone of Destiny's cold voice resounded in Wang Chong's mind. Special event, Destiny's Choice. With this voice, light and shadow began to shift. Rumble! A massive city began to rise from the ground, with this city as the boundary. On one side were tens of thousands of black war banners, and on the other was a vast sea of yellow dragon banners. The moment the two sides met, they immediately began to fight. Translated by DX HasoXD, edited by DX HasoXD. Wang Chong's heart paused, and he immediately stopped. The wheels of history slowly turn. No matter how many tributaries it passes, it will eventually return to its original course. One mountain cannot accommodate two tigers, and the same continent cannot have two massive empires at the same time. This is a war that cannot be avoided. Of the two empires, only one can proudly roar at the summit of the world, while the other will rapidly decline, falling into the twilight years of a lion. Upon hearing these last words, Wang Chang's entire body trembled. But all of this was far from over. A lion that has lost its claws and teeth is like an eagle that has lost its wings. This is the twilight years of a lion, and it is also the choice of destiny. As the controller of destiny, Host has one and only special treatment. By paying 8,000 points of destiny energy, Host can choose to exempt himself and withdraw, or Host can choose to enter of his own accord and receive 2,000 points of destiny energy as a reward. Warning: if Host chooses to enter of his own accord, Host will face tremendous danger. If the mission fails, the empire will fall, and Host will be obliterated. As Wang Chong listened to the voice in his mind, a hint of a smile tugged at the corner of his lips. 8,000 points of destiny energy. Thus, during the Battle of the Triangular Gap, if he had not exchanged for the karmic battle armor, he could have been exempt. But even if he had this chance, would he really withdraw? Confirm. Wang Chong faintly smiled. Without the slightest reluctance, he instantly stepped into the Qixi armory. Flap, flap, flap. The black eagle flew over the mountains, scattering in every direction. The situation at Talas had not only reached Qixi, but also the capital, where it sparked a fierce debate in the imperial court. Your Majesty, we should immediately send out soldiers to reinforce Lord Gao Xianji. 30,000 elite soldiers trapped is no small matter. If the Anqi Protectorate army is defeated, Sueya, Shul, and the other 4 garrisons of Anqi will also fall, and all of Anqi will fall. We should immediately send reinforcements to Anqi. In the imperial court, several generals were passionately complaining about the severity of the situation. Absurd. Just as they finished speaking, a minister on good terms with the Prince of Qi immediately stepped forward and sternly rebuked them. Gao Xianji is a godly strategist. Ever since he joined the army, Lord Gao has won almost every battle in the western regions. Now that the Sher Kingdom has fallen, Lord Gao has led his army west and smoothly occupied Talas. With Lord Gao's abilities, it won't be long before he defeats the Arabs. What need is there to talk about sending troops now? Have all of you lost your minds? Although King Qi and the King of Song had always been on bad terms, and the two factions had always argued in the imperial court, neither side willing to give in to the other. But this time, it was not a purely personal grudge. Of all the protector generals and great generals of the Tang dynasty, none had achieved more dazzling feats than Anqi Protector General Gao Xianji. Although he did not have the most seniority, and could not compare to the other great generals and protector generals, the military skills he displayed, and his astonishing feats on the battlefield far surpassed those of the other protector generals and great generals. In the military and the imperial court, Gao Xianji even had a nickname, the ever-victorious general. Ever since he had taken the position of protector general, Gao Xianji had never suffered a defeat. Moreover, his tactics were swift and unpredictable, and he was extremely skilled at taking the initiative. It was precisely because of his extraordinary abilities and the terrifying fighting power of the Anqi Protectorate army that he had been able to suppress the kingdoms of the western regions with a measly army of tens of thousands, forcing all the other kingdoms to bow their heads and allowing the western regions to remain impregnable. This time, although Gao Xianji's soldiers had been trapped in the city of Talas, many people believed that this was Gao Xianji's strategy. In the end, Gao Xianji would still defeat the Arabs and emerge victorious. After all, similar situations had occurred before, and they were not rare. Gao Xianji had always defeated the strong despite being outnumbered, proving his ability. Moreover, Arabia was just a trifling country. But this time is different. This request for reinforcements was sent by Gao Xianji's deputy general, Feng Changqing. This lowly subject believes that this war should be treated with even greater importance. One of the generals continued to try to persuade the crowd. Lord Shui, be at ease. Lord Gao will be fine. An imperial censor indifferently said. In the end, this debate came to an end. Feng Changqing's request for reinforcements did not cause much of a ripple in the imperial court. Gao Xianji was skilled in blitzkrieg tactics, and many people believed that it wouldn't be long before another report of victory came from Anxi. But 10 days later, when a request for reinforcements came from the western regions and Gao Xianji's soldiers were still trapped in Talas, everyone finally paled. Even the slowest of people could tell that this time was different from the past. Gao Xianji, the spear of the empire of the Tang dynasty in the western regions, had encountered an extremely powerful foe. While the capital was still debating how to respond to Anxi's request for reinforcements, all of Qixi and Wuxiang were on the brink of war. All the soldiers of the Qixi Protectorate army were divided into units of 10,000, and they trained day and night. As for the 5,000 Wuxiang cavalry, they were also preparing for battle. Bows, ballistae, sabers, spears, axes, and halberds were being shipped out of the Qixi armory and distributed to the entire army. The entire Qixi Protectorate had a ballista and 200 ballista bolts in units of 5, quickly forming a ballista army of 2,000 ballistae. The ballista squad tactic that Wang Chong had used in Dian Mangpo's night raid was rapidly revealing its edge and becoming a fighting force. Although an army of 10,000 was only equipped with 2,000 ballistae, this unique ballista squad tactic allowed for clear division of labor, rapid adjustment, and frequent firing of ballistae to maximize the power of these heavy weapons of war of the Tang dynasty. In terms of lethality, they were 5 to 10 times stronger than they were in the past. This was a new tactic that Wang Chong had created for ballistae. Marquis, Lord Feng Chongqing has sent another request for reinforcements. How should we reply? Should we still refuse? In the hall where Wang Chong's subordinates had gathered, Su Kui bowed to Wang Chong, a letter in his hand. Tell Lord Feng to give me 2 months. 2 months later, I will definitely send an army to Talas to assist Lord Gao. Wang Chong sternly said. With Talas in danger and Gao Xianji trapped, Feng Chongqing's requests for reinforcements continued to pour into Qixi like snowflakes. In just 10 short days, Wang Chong had received at least 20 or 30 letters. Feng Chongqing was Gao Xianji's deputy general and his left and right arms. The two of them were known as the twin walls of the empire, and although Wang Chong had never met this famed general renowned for his logistics and administrative abilities, Feng Chongqing had left an extremely deep impression on him. Chapter 856. Unlike the War of the Southwest, there would not be as many civilian casualties in this war, and it would not involve as many soldiers, but it would decide the fate of the western regions and the empire. And what Wang Chong knew was different from what Feng Chongqing knew. The effects of this war were far more terrifying than anyone could imagine. The effects of this war on the Central Plains and the Tang dynasty would be far greater than the effects of 10 wars of the Southwest. This was because it would not decide the gains and losses of a single side, but the future of the Central Plains. When a lion lost its sharp claws and teeth, it would enter its twilight years, and when an empire lost its drive to expand and advance, it would enter its old age from its youth. From then on, it would become obsessed with infighting and killing each other. This was something that no one could imagine. Wang Chong had seen it for himself, and knew of that sort of chaos. Thus, no matter what, Wang Chong could not permit the Tang dynasty to fall into such a state. Wang Chong was no less anxious for this battle than Feng Chongqing. But no matter how anxious Wang Chong was, he was keenly aware that this was not the time to send soldiers. Both he and the Qixi Protectorate were far from ready. In these circumstances, if they rashly sent soldiers, not only would they fail to help Gao Xianji and the Anxi Protectorate army, they would end up throwing themselves into prison, sending the Qixi Protectorate and Wuxiang's cavalry to their deaths. History had already changed. In his last life, Anxi Protector General Gao Xianji had marched 1,000 li and lost the city of Talas by a hair. In the end, he was trapped in the wilderness, attacked by the armies of the Arabian Empire, and eventually defeated in the wilderness of the city of Talas. But now, everything was different. Gao Xianji had successfully entered the city of Talas, seized the initiative, and had the geographical advantage. With Gao Xianji's strength as an imperial great general, more than 30,000 elites, and tens of thousands of mercenaries, it would not be too difficult for him to resist the Arab army in the wilderness. There was no need to doubt Gao Xianji's talent in the art of war, and the strength of his 30,000 Samanshi elites was enough to show disdain for the entire empire. Back then, Gao Xianji persisted for almost a month, even though he had lost the initiative and the geographical advantage. Now, with the help of the city of Talas, it would not be a problem for him to persist for another 2 months. This was also the real reason why Wang Chong decided not to send troops for the time being. Yes, Marquis. Su Qi immediately bowed and left to receive the order. Li Sai. After Su Qi left, Wang Chong shifted his gaze and looked at the first palace hall's sturdy figure, Li Sai. Here. Li Sai immediately stepped forward. How is the matter of Wuxia Steel going? Have you urged Ablonidin and Arloja? Is there still no news? Wang Chong asked. Wuxia Steel was Wang Chong's greatest concern, and it was also his most pressing problem. If his guess was right, the 10,000 elites of the Abbasid Caliphate's Mamelukes were waiting for battle on the border. In the history that Wang Chong knew, the Mamelukes were known as the uncrowned kings, the strongest cavalry of the pre-apocalyptic era. Their equipment was excellent, and their combat strength was unimaginable to everyone. Moreover, from the moment they were born, they had been trained to kill. They were true war machines. Although the Wuxian cavalry were very powerful, without the Wuxia steel swords and the meteoric metal armor, the Wuxian cavalry were far from their peak state. The strongest armies of the empires of the East and West were gathered on the battlefield of Talas. The cold-blooded and cruel nature of the battle was far more terrifying than anyone could imagine. Wang Chong would never permit the Wuxian cavalry that he had painstakingly trained to recklessly charge onto the battlefield before they were fully formed, only to be needlessly buried there. Marquis, there's news from Sindhu. Ablonidin and Arloja have replied that the high priest has agreed. The 6,000 June of Hyderabad, or has been prepared, and can be taken at any time. But there's a problem. Talas is currently in a state of war, and the road from Sindhu to the Central Plains has been cut off. They can no longer use the normal route to transport the ore from Hyderabad. Li Sai loudly said. Buzz! Li Sai's words caused everyone in the hall to tense up. The news from the city of Talas had completely disrupted their rhythm, and everyone was frantically trying to figure out what to do. Everyone had their own things to do, just like the different parts of a machine, each with their own responsibilities. They had no idea what Li Sai was talking about, but they all knew the importance of Wuxia Steel. Wang Chong creased his brow and suddenly stepped down from his throne. The Arabs and the Anchi Protectorate army were still locked in a stalemate at the Battle of Talas, but some effects were already beginning to show. The Sindhi high priest was clearly worried that this unprecedented battle would have an adverse effect on this transaction, worth 6 million taels of gold. Wang Chong's generosity was beginning to show its effects. At present, Wang Chong was the greatest financial backer of the Hyderabad or transaction, and he was also the greatest help to the Sindhu. This was a loss that the high priest could not bear. This was why the 6,000 June of Hyderabad, or had been prepared so quickly. But things were not going as smoothly as they seemed. The battle between Gao Xianji and Abu Muslim had cut off the transportation route to Hyderabad ore. Rashly transporting the ore at a time like this would end up being intercepted by the Arabian Empire. Tap, tap. Wang Chong's footsteps echoed through the hall, his heavy footsteps seeming to strike at the hearts of everyone present. As Wang Chong walked forward, everyone slowly turned to the only model in the hall. As they gazed at the city of Talas in the center of the model, they all felt an indescribable strangeness. This model had been made by Wang Chong before the battle had even begun, and it had been there for a very long time. But no one had realized what this model signified, not until this moment. Marquis, the path between the Central Plains and Sindhu truly has been cut off. I've already sent many scouts and rock eagles. The area around Talas is filled with Arab soldiers. I've already investigated and found that all trade routes along the Silk Road between the East and the West have been cut off. Even the Arab caravans had stopped all activity. The path between the East and the West has truly been cut off. We can't go through there. Perched on his shoulder, Zhang Ke gazed at the undulating terrain and mountains on the model, as he respectfully reported to Wang Chong. Wang Chong frowned, and silently lowered his head to the model. On the sand table all the mountains, rivers, passages, and cities were clearly marked. This was the result of a large number of scouts, a great deal of time, and all sorts of meticulous methods. Just as Zhang Ke had said, the geography of the city of Talas was extremely unique. This had once been a hub for trade routes between the east and the west, but after the war, the Silk Road had been cut off, leaving no path between the two. Even if Sindha had agreed to Wang Chong's request, the 6,000 June of Hyderabad or wouldn't have been enough. No, Wang Chong's eyes flashed as he suddenly said, the path hasn't been cut off. The passage hasn't been severed. There's still another passage between the Great Tang and Sindhu. Ah! Everyone was stunned by Wang Chong's words. How could that be? I've already investigated. All the trade routes have stopped. There can't be another path. Zhang Ke said in shock. It wasn't that he didn't believe Wang Chong's words, but that he had been racking his brains and expending a great deal of resources and manpower to find another path. But all his efforts had ended in failure. In addition, merchants valued profit. If there was another path, he might not know about it. But these merchants would definitely know about it. The hall was quiet as everyone looked at Wang Chong. Swish! Wang Chong said nothing, only took a small red flag, and inserted it into an inconspicuous position on the sand table. Everyone was dumbstruck by the location of this red flag. Zhang Ke's eyes went wide, his mouth agape, but he couldn't say a single word. The Uzun Plateau. No one had expected Wang Chong's flag to be inserted into the territory of the Uzun Empire. He actually wanted to use Uzun to transport the 6,000 June of Hyderabad ore. Even the boldest person would not dare to imagine such a wild and unconstrained train of thought. It doesn't matter that the Silk Road has been cut off. Li Sai informed Sindhu. Tell them to pass through Greater and Lesser Balar to the north of Sindhu, and use the Uzun Empire to transport the 6,000 June of Hyderabad ore. In addition, take 2,000 Wuxian cavalry, and pass through Greater and Lesser Balar to provide support. Wang Chong said firmly, Yes, Marquis. Li Sai said without hesitation. He had never doubted Wang Chong's decisions. Behind him, the people in the hall were still immersed in intense shock. But gradually, they seemed to understand something, and pensive looks appeared on their faces. To pass through northern Sindhu and pass through Greater and Lesser Balar, as well as the Uzun Plateau, to transport the Hyderabad, ore was a path that even the craziest merchant would not dare to imagine. The reason was simple. Not only was the road rough and bumpy, it also passed through the most dangerous territory of the Uzun Empire. The cavalry of the Uzun Empire would not only plunder Longxi, but also plunder merchants traveling between the east and west. One of the reasons the Tang dynasty had established a protectorate in Qixi and stationed an army there was to prevent the plundering of the Uzun Empire. No merchant would be crazy enough to send their goods into the territory of bandits. But the Battle of the Triangular Gap had completely altered the structure of Qixi. Dian Mangpoch had died in battle and Dusong Mangpoch had fled in defeat. The northern border of the Uzun Plateau no longer had any soldiers that could threaten Wang Chong's plans. Wang Chong's idea seemed bold, but it was actually the most appropriate. Chapter 857. Wang Chong had no idea what the others were thinking. The sudden war between Gao Xianji and the Arabs had completely disrupted his plans, and there were far too many things he needed to take care of. What he needed to worry about now was far more than just Wuxia steel. Chung Sanyuan, what did Hulayeg say? Has he still not resolved the matter of the fourth prince? I can't give him any more time about the war horses. I need his answer now. Wang Chong turned his head and said, Hulayeg had gone to Mount Sammi of the Western Turkic Khaganate, so Wang Chong had left the matter of the fourth prince to Chung Sanyuan. Replying to Marquis, Hulayeg has sent a letter saying that Ishbara Khagan had already made his preparations, but there was a sudden change. As for the fourth prince, I'm afraid that we won't be able to proceed as planned. Chung Sanyuan hesitantly said, Oh. Wang Chong's brow creased, and then his eyes flashed as he sneered. Is it because of the Battle of Talas in the western regions? Yes. Chung Sanyuan lowered his head after a moment's hesitation. But in the end, he still chose to speak the truth. Qixi was currently in need of manpower and soldiers, and Hulaeg's failure at Mount Sami was clearly not good news. It seems like the Turks still haven't gotten used to the rules they should follow when dealing with me. No matter what the outcome of this battle is, they won't have a single chance. Cavalry. A cavalry without a horse is just an infantry. In the past, Wang Chong wouldn't have cared how much time Hulaeg had to spend, but now, a great battle was imminent. Wang Chong needed a large number of soldiers, and these war horses were particularly important. Ishbarakagan had clearly sensed this, which was why he had changed his mind and thought of delaying tactics. Chung Sanyuan, I will give you 3,000 Wuxian cavalry. Lead a group of soldiers from the Qixi Protectorate and set out from Qixi in the next few days, immediately penetrating the Turkic steppe. Remember, only follow the water. Wherever there is water, there will be horses, cows, sheep, and even Turkic tribes. Animals can't live without water. I want you to sweep through all parts of the water source in 3 days. In 10 days, crush the Turkic armies in the west. Wang Chong's eyes were cold and brimming with killing intent. In the Battle of Talas, Gao Xinji had been hailed as the war god of the western regions, but he was at a disadvantage, surrounded by the Arabs. Wang Chong had previously thought that this matter would create an unfavorable variable in his deal with Ishbarakagan. It was highly likely that the Western Turks would begin to covet Ishbarakagan and believe that he had a chance. What Wang Chong needed to do was utterly destroy any hope that the Western Turks had, making them understand that even if something happened in the western regions, as long as he was there, Qixi would be impregnable. Yes, this subordinate obeys. Chung Sanyuan immediately left to carry out the order. In this period of time, everyone had felt an intense pressure. Letters had come one after another from Anxi, and Gao Xinji, with his 30,000 elites, had been hailed as the blitzkrieg general of the western regions, the invincible general. When he led an army into a campaign, he always ended it quickly and rarely lasted for too long. But now, 10-some days had passed, and this illustrious imperial great general of the Tang dynasty was still trapped in Talas. Even the slowest person, even those who had no understanding of Arabia, could tell that Gao Xinji had encountered an unprecedentedly powerful foe. Anxi was in a state of emergency, and all hopes rested on them. Chen Bin, your subordinate is here. Inform Zhao Jingdian that I will only give him 20 days. No matter the price, the road from the capital to Qixi must be opened. In addition, I will leave the construction of the cement road from Qixi to Anxi to you. Get in touch with Feng Chongqing and have him cooperate fully. I will only give you 25 days to complete this road. All the manpower and resources of the City of Steel will be at your disposal. If the road is not opened in 25 days, you will be dealt with according to military law. Yes, this subordinate obeys. Chen Bin bowed, and without a word of rebuttal, he quickly turned around and left. Order after order was issued from the hall, and all of Qixi and Wuxiang began to move in accordance with Wang Chong's orders. Gradually, the number of people in the hall began to dwindle, and after some time, the only thing left in the hall was a beautiful white figure. What's wrong? Su Yiqing gracefully stepped forward, gazing at Wang Chong's silently furrowed brow as she softly said, Is there something that can't be resolved? Su Yiqing carefully examined Wang Chong's face. Wang Chong's face was handsome and bright, possessing a maturity and steadiness that no youth of his age could rival. His sword-like eyebrows and imposing aura made Wang Chong's body seem even more enchanting. But at this moment, Wang Chong's brow was slightly creased, and one couldn't help but feel sorry for him. Wuxiang, Qixi Anxi. Only Su Yiqing was keenly aware of the enormous pressure placed on this young man's shoulders. Everyone treated him as their pillar of support, believing him to be omnipotent, but they had forgotten that he was actually only a 17-year-old youth. It's nothing. Wang Chong waved his hand, still deep in thought. But our soldiers are still far from enough. The pavilion closest to the water enjoys moonlight first, and Talas is still too close to the Abbasid Caliphate. The 5,000 Wuxiang cavalry I have are far from enough to change the course of this war. Based on Wang Chong's understanding of the Arabs and the information he had gathered so far, the Abbasid Caliphate had at least 200,000 soldiers, and this number was only going to increase. The soldiers from Qixi alone were far from enough. This was also what had been troubling Wang Chong in this period of time. He still didn't have enough chips in his hands. Wang Chong couldn't help but sigh at this thought. But at this moment, he heard a soft chuckle at his ear. Startled, Wang Chong raised his head and saw that Su Yiqin was lightly covering her mouth and nose with her slender fingers. She was laughing so hard that even her face was red. I thought you were worried about something. So it's this. Leave it to me. I'll help you handle this matter. I guarantee that in a month, you'll have at least 6,000 Wuxiang cavalry, Su Yiqin confidently said. Wang Chong's body trembled as he stared in shock at Su Yiqin. No one understood Wuxiang village more than he did. They were extremely xenophobic, and ordinary people couldn't even enter. Even though he had the memories of his last life, he had still spent an enormous amount of effort to recruit 5,000 cavalry. Moreover, Wuxiang village didn't have many people in the first place, so it was already quite difficult for them to allocate 5,000 cavalry. Not even Wang Chong dared to ask for more. But now, Su Yiqin was confidently promising him that in a month, she would recruit 6,000 more Wuxiang cavalry for him. What, you don't believe me? Su Yiqin smiled. This matter wasn't too difficult to begin with. It's just that you men are clumsy and don't know how to do it properly. Wang Chong stared blankly at Su Yiqin, completely speechless. If someone else had said this to him, Wang Chong would have treated it as a joke. But since it was Su Yiqin, the logistics queen of the Tang dynasty, who said this, the meaning and weight were completely different. All right, Yiqin, I'll leave this matter to you. North of the Uzan Highlands, northeast corner, a place where few people tread. Rumble, the air surged, and the hurried sound of hooves broke the silence of the highlands. The earth trembled, and in just a moment, a torrent of steel roared out from the highlands. Everyone keep up. Don't fall behind. Be careful. Shouts resounded through the highlands. At the front of the group, Li Sai took the lead and galloped over. He was dressed in heavy armor, and his massive body was like a heavy mountain, exuding a storm of pressure. The Wuxia steel sword was the most important thing to all of them, far surpassing anything else. Thus, of Wang Chong's subordinates, Li Sai had been the first to set out. Dispatching his number one general was enough to show how much importance Wang Chong placed on this matter. Is everyone here? Take a head count. In addition, carefully inspect your weapons and equipment so that you can deal with any possible battle. Li Sai's voice was like a great bell, resounding over the highlands. Yes, General. The moment Li Sai gave the order, the 2,000 Wuxiang cavalry swiftly assembled and finished their preparations. Kong Xian, I'll give you 1,000 soldiers. Set out from here, through Greater and Lesser Balar, and penetrate deep into Sindha to provide support for the caravans transporting the ore. There's no need to say how much importance Marquis places on this matter. Nothing can be allowed to go wrong. Understood? Li Sai's gaze was sharp. He turned his head and looked at a deputy general beside him. This person was called Kong Xian, a person that Li Sai had unearthed while leading troops. He was calm, determined, decisive, and had good judgment. He was able to assess the situation and make the most correct decision. Li Sai sensed the talent in him and brought him along. He gave him military books and strategies, as well as everything he had learned. After experiencing several major battles, Kong Xian had already matured into Li Sai's strongest deputy general. This was also why Li Sai had transferred him over for this operation. General, be at ease. This general swears to complete this mission to the death. Kong Xian dismounted and knelt on the ground, his face determined. There's no need to say anything else. Go. Li Sai waved his hand. With these words, Kong Xian quickly mounted his horse and led the 1,000 Wuxiang cavalry toward Greater and Lesser Balar and Sindhu. Li Sai led the other 1,000 soldiers and stood on the plateau, watching Kong Xian and the others leave. Only after a long while did he regain his composure. All other soldiers, hear my order. Without my order, No one is allowed to move. We will wait here until they return and provide support at any time. Yes. Chapter 858. General. At this moment, a soft voice rang out in Li Sai's ear. The vultures of the Izan have appeared. They've discovered us. Li Sai's eyes flashed as he followed the scout's gaze. In the southwest direction, a huge black vulture spread its wings and appeared in the sky above them. It circled around in circles, obviously spying on them. Even farther away, a black silhouette on a warhorse was standing on the horizon, watching them from a distance. From his attire, he was clearly an Izan cavalryman. There's no need to worry. Let him be. Li Sai only glanced at him for a moment before quickly turning his head back. There's no one in the northern border of the Izan that can threaten us now. After saying this, he stared to the northwest like a god of war, silently waiting. To the northeast of Chishi, across a long curved border, one would venture deep into the Turkic steppe. Rumble. Almost at the same time as Li Sai set off, Chung Sanyuan led the 3,000 Wuxian cavalry through the most fertile areas of the steppe. The Wuxian cavalry rarely ventured deep into the Turkic steppe, so Chung Sanyuan had brought 3 guides with him this time. "My lord, it's just up ahead. Tinsum Li is an oasis. The people of the Guli tribe often bring their cows and sheep there to drink." A thin Hu on a warhorse pointed ahead. "All soldiers move out." A cold light flashed in Chung Sanyuan's eyes as he pointed his sword forward. In an instant, tens of thousands of troops surged forward, brushing past Chung Sanyuan and charging forward. 15 minutes later, when the 3,000 Wuxian cavalry arrived, what they saw was not a clear oasis, but a vast sea of cows and sheep, as well as Turkic who dressed in lamb skins. Not good, it's the Han. Why would their army appear here? Run! The sudden appearance of Chung Sanyuan and the others sent the Hu herdsmen into a panic. There were also some herdsmen who quickly gathered and formed a small defensive force. They shot arrows at Chung Sanyuan and the others. Kill! Without the slightest hesitation, Chung Sanyuan led the 3,000 Wuxian cavalry and galloped away like a whirlwind. The Turks had vicious temperaments, and every seemingly innocent Turkic herdsman would become a qualified Turkic warrior once they put on their armor. They would follow the army into the heart of the Central Plains and become a savage existence that ravaged the people of the Central Plains. This was the simplest truth. There was no pretense or mercy in this battle. When the battle ended, the land around the oasis was stained with blood, and there were corpses of cattle, sheep, and herdsmen everywhere. Let's go to the next location. Chung Sanyuan's sharp eyes focused on the north, and with a wave of his hand, he led the 3,000 cavalry forward like a dark cloud. One place after another, Chung Sanyuan strictly followed Wang Chang's orders, charging through the water sources of the Turkic steppe and sweeping through the surrounding herdsmen and tribes. His movements were clean and swift, and in a single day, he had swept through several dozen water sources. And as countless herdsmen and tribes fled, the matter quickly spread across the western Turkic steppe. Bastard! Upon receiving the urgent report from the herdsmen of the Turkic steppe, a Turkic deputy general on the western border of the Western Turks clenched his teeth and stood up. These Han are too impudent. Do they really think that our Turks have no one left? With the death of the Black Wolf Yabgu, all the soldiers had fallen into this deputy general's hands. At the very least, until Ishbara Khagan appointed a new Yabgu, all the 30,000 cavalry in the west would be under his control. Have you found out? Only 3,000 some? That young marquis of the Tang dynasty isn't here? Nalulubu pressed his hands against the metal table, half his body leaning over it as he spoke with a vicious expression. General, we've already investigated. That Wang Chong of the Tang dynasty isn't here. And the one leading the army is a nameless nobody. Moreover, he only has 3,000 soldiers. Our people have already confirmed it time and time again. The Turkic scout kneeled in the tent and respectfully said, "Pass on my order. Gather the army and set out with me. Kill every last one of these Han." Nalulubu's voice was still echoing through the tent as he strode over the table and out of the tent. In the Battle of the Chishi Armory, the 5,000 elites led by the Black Wolf Yabgu, a good Alan, had been completely wiped out. This battle had dealt a massive blow to the Western Turkic Khaganate's forces in the Chishi region. But even so, the Western Turkic Khaganate had left behind an extremely powerful force in the region. Nalalubu might not have been as famous as a good Alan, but he was still a famous general of the Western Turks. He had experienced many battles, and with his 30,000 soldiers, he was still a formidable force. Rumble. Following Nalalubu's order, all the forces of the Western Turkic Khaganate in the Chishi region began to gather. Nay, as thousands of war horses surged toward Chung Sanyuan and the 3,000 Wuxian cavalry. My lord, they've moved out. At almost the same time as the Western Turks moved out, on the distant Chishi border, Zhang Ke took back a large eagle that had flown down from the sky and turned to Chung Sanyuan. Haha, as expected, my lord predicted. As long as we occupy the water source and make it impossible for the Turkic shepherds to drink their cattle and horses, the Turkic army will definitely be unable to restrain itself from attacking. Chung Sanyuan was riding on a large green horse, a blushing look on his face. The steppe was covered in lush grass, and while the Turks had no fixed residence, they could graze wherever they pleased. But no matter where they grazed, they couldn't live without a source of water. As long as they could grasp this point, they would be able to grasp their fatal weakness. In this aspect, Chung Sanyuan could only prostrate himself in admiration of Wang Chong. Although it was just a few words, they had struck at their greatest weakness. Flap flap. Without another word, Chung Sanyuan picked up a carrier pigeon with golden eyes, released it, and silently sent it off in the direction of Chishi. After doing all this, Chung Sanyuan faintly smiled and turned to the 3,000 Wuxian cavalry behind him, their formation like an impenetrable fortress. All soldiers, hear my order. Prepare for battle. A little more than 2 hours later, the earth suddenly began to rumble. In the distance, one could see a cloud of dust rising from the horizon and countless pieces of grass drifting into the sky. In the distance, one could see a faint black line wriggling as it charged toward the Tang army. Awa! The wolf pack howled, and a huge war flag quickly rose from the opposite horizon. On the black flag, a picture of a gray wolf fluttered in the wind. The Turkic army that had been garrisoned in the Chishi region and posed the greatest threat to the Tang dynasty, had finally caught wind of the news and rushed over. All soldiers, get ready. Charge! Charge! While the 30,000 Turkic soldiers were still very far away and in disarray, Chung Sanyuan suddenly smiled and waved his hand. Leading the 3,000 Wuxian cavalry in a fearless charge, they were like a reef in the midst of a massive wave. Clang clang clang. As they charged one after another, war halos shot out from beneath Chung Sanyuan and the others' feet. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of halos gathered together, turning the 3,000-man army into a small fortress. Bastard! Nalalubu's eyes widened at this sight, and his blood surged to his head, his entire person enraged. He had brought more than 30,000 soldiers, more than 10 times the number of his foes, but this nameless pawn of the Tang dynasty had actually dared to attack him. Kill them all! Leave none alive! Nalalubu ordered. Not only did the 30,000 soldiers not slow down, they even began to charge forward. The distance between the two sides continued to close. Boom! With a heaven-shaking boom, the 3,000 Wuxian cavalry formed into a long arrow formation that fiercely collided with the 30,000 Western Turks. Nay! Kill them all! Kill them all! As the two armies clashed, countless cavalry were thrown into the air and then dropped to the ground, their blood quickly staining the earth. As countless people looked on in shock, the 3,000 Wuxian cavalry displayed an overwhelming strength. The 30,000-strong Turkic army was routed at the first clash, and the center was quickly pierced through. The difference in quality and quantity was on full display at this moment. In this first clash, the Turks had already lost more than 4,000 men. Bastard! Nalalubu was infuriated. Clang! He unsheathed his saber and pointed it at Chung Sanyuan. Nameless pawn, hand over your life. Nalalubu waved his saber and led his elite soldiers in a charge at Chung Sanyuan. He could already tell that while this great Tang cavalry was astonishingly powerful, The strength of their commander wasn't very high. To shoot a man, first shoot the horse, and to capture the band, first capture the leader. As long as he could kill their commander, the rest would naturally collapse without a fight. Rumble. Seeing Nalalubu move, the other Turkic soldiers immediately followed him. I was just waiting for you. Chung Sanyuan sneered, a harsh light in his eyes. Rumble. Just when Nalalubu was leading his elites in a charge, the unthinkable took place. Buzz. The 3,000 Wuxiang cavalry split into units of 100, and like fireworks, they divided themselves into 30 smaller groups and began to cut and slash at the Tang soldiers. The center of the Turkic army had already been routed, and now it was in complete disarray. Nalalubu was caught off guard, his face filled with confusion, and his warhorse unconsciously slowed down. But before he could come to his senses, the 3,000 Wuxiang cavalry suddenly turned back. Not good. Chapter 859. Aya. Chapter 853 Slaughter. Aya. An earth-shattering scream resounded as the thick stellar energy that had expanded for more than 4 feet around Lulubu's body was swiftly annihilated. After a brief moment of silence, Lulubu's entire body was covered in sword and saber wounds as he fell heavily to the ground. Puff, puff, puff. Countless arrows of blood shot out from his body and the warhorse beneath him. Even in death, Nalalubu's eyes were still wide open, apparently not daring to believe that he would die to the encirclement of 3,000 people. Clang! A Wuxiang horseman charged forward and slashed down with his sword, sending Nalalubu's head flying several zhang into the air. And with Nalalubu's death, the Western Turkic army was thrown into chaos. Kill! Chung Sanyuan didn't hesitate at all. With a command, he immediately seized the opportunity to attack. Nalalubu had been too careless. Although Chung Sanyuan was no famous general, the Wuxiang cavalry behind him were the best cavalry in the world. Wang Chong had used this move to kill the Saint Martial Realm Dian Pugil at the Zhangzheng recruit training camp on the Uzun Plateau. And this was only Nalalubu. Without Nalalubu as commander, the Western Turkic army still had 20,000 some soldiers, but it was no longer capable of organizing an effective counterattack. Kill! By the time Heba Yi and his 8,000 soldiers arrived from another direction, the outcome of this battle had been decided. When the news of the defeat reached Mount Sanmi, the entire Kaghan court was shaken. To the south of Chishi, along the Silk Road that led to the capital, a wide cement road stretched out like a belt of jade, passing through numerous mountains and extending for thousands of kilometers toward the western regions. At the end of this road, tens of thousands of craftsmen worked like a swarm of bees. At the very front of this group, Zhao Jingdian and several nobles of the capital and the elders of the great clans stood side by side, supervising the work day and night. Flap, flap, flap. A messenger pigeon flew down from the sky, and Zhao Jingdian extended his right hand to catch it. With just a glance, Zhao Jingdian's eyes immediately turned solemn. It's Marquis's letter. Zhao Jingdian opened the letter, glanced at it, then put it away and walked forward. He stopped in front of a well-dressed old man. Mr. Su, how far are we from Wuxiang? Zhao Jingdian asked. It's not far now. In fact, we could have reached Wuxiang not too long ago. But according to Master's orders, we widened the road and strengthened the hardness of the cement road to allow it to carry more weight. But if there are no accidents, we should be able to reach Wuxiang in 20 days at most. The old man replied. Zhao Jingdian was constructing the cement road from the capital to Wuxiang, and this old man was the chief engineer, the representative of the clan alliance. All of the construction progress was under his control. 20 days. Zhao Jingdian frowned and extended a finger. I'll only give you 10 days. You must reach Wuxiang within 10 days. This. After a moment's hesitation, the old man nodded. Although it's somewhat difficult, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. If my lord is in a hurry, I can personally supervise and facilitate this matter. Okay. Zhao Jingdian nodded and said no more. In his letter, Wang Chong had promised him 20 days, but Zhao Jingdian was well aware that for Marquis to personally send him a letter, it had to be an extremely important matter. Thus, Zhao Jingdian had given 10 days. I hope that I can help Marquis as much as possible, Zhao Jingdian said to himself. The cement road leading to the western regions was in full swing, and at the same time, the countless chimneys of the central plains were spewing out black smoke. All the smithing clans, smiths, and smiths were working at full speed, madly constructing the various steel modules required for Wangchong. If one looked down from the sky, one could see that the hundreds of thousands of smiths of the central plains were madly working to forge steel. It was a majestic sight to behold. Load all these steel modules onto the carriages. I need all of you to move them to Qixi as quickly as possible. As for profits, there's no need to worry. The client this time is the Wang clan of the capital, a clan of ministers and generals most trustworthy. The buyer is none other than the young marquis personally conferred by the Holy Emperor. In Jingnan, outside an ancient-styled estate of a great clan, a refined steward dressed in azure robes was urging a caravan to load the steel modules onto the carriages. With the experience of forging for the first time, the speed at which these swordsmithing aristocratic families forged was much faster. Save it. Qixi Protector General, our Tang Dynasty's 8th great general. Who in the Tang Dynasty doesn't know of him? Relax. I don't need to worry about that. Outside the estate, the muscular caravan leader chuckled and made a gesture. With a wave of his hand, this caravan of tinsome carriages set off for Qixi. From east to west, from south to north, tens of thousands of such caravans dragged countless steel modules toward Qixi day and night. With a single order from Wangchong, the entire Tang Dynasty was at his beck and call. Time slowly passed, and 8 days later, when a wide cement road, more than 2 zhang long, reached Wuxiang, the entire city of steel was abuzz. Cement road. Cement road. Everyone look. A new cement road is coming. Ah, let me take a look. Unbelievable. What a strange thing. It's really as hard as stone. The city of steel was cheering as tens of thousands of craftsmen flooded out of the city. A new road had appeared in the Tang Dynasty. It was made from soft sand and lime, but it was as hard as stone, and could withstand several dozen tons of weight. Even a warrior with the strength of 1,000 jin would find it very difficult to damage it. This news had already spread throughout the entire Tang Dynasty. Moreover, this new cement road was being built from the distant capital to Wuxiang. This news had already spread through the city, and everyone was eagerly awaiting it. Lord Zhao, welcome back. Countless fireworks soared into the sky. At the very front of the thousands of craftsmen, Master of Architecture Zhang Shouji had personally come out of the city to welcome Zhao Jingdian. Venerable Senior Zhang, we meet again. Zhao Jingdian clasped his hands and smiled. The two of them had fought side by side in the War of the Southwest, and were old acquaintances. That's right, where is Marquis? Marquis has already gone to Qixi, but even if you went there, you probably wouldn't be able to find him. Zhang Shouji had his hands tucked into his sleeves, a faint smile on his face. Oh, how could that be? Zhao Jingdian's eyes widened in surprise. He had worked day and night on the Silk Road precisely, so that he could reach Wuxiang a little earlier and meet Wangchong. But to his surprise, the situation was completely different from what he had expected. In the Battle of Talas, everyone has placed their hopes on Marquis. How could Marquis possibly sit still at a time like this? Zhang Shouji saw through Zhao Jingdian's confusion and smiled. In addition, don't ask me about Marquis's whereabouts. Not even I know. Marquis is a very careful thinker, and his thoughts are not something we can speculate on. Zhao Jingdian nodded in thought. Not many people knew that Wangchong was not in Qixi. Even Su Yiqin, who was closest to Wangchong, only knew that he had gone to the western regions to meet some people. But not even she knew the specifics. Marquis, up ahead is the territory of the Gonka people. These people are extremely crude, and don't even know how to ride horses. Milord, do you really intend to hire them? In the northeast corner of the western regions, in a barren and desolate region, Yang Hongchong rode next to Wangchong. Behind them was the 5,000 soldiers of the Qixi army. Upon hearing that Wangchong was coming to the western regions, Yang Hongchong had immediately put down everything he was doing and personally come out to welcome him. But Yang Hongchong was still confused by Wangchong's decision. If Milord truly wishes to find mercenaries, this one knows many good ones, any of them more formidable than the Gonka people. Moreover, the Gonka people don't have many people, so they won't be of much use. There's no need. I'll bring up other mercenaries in the future. I've come this time to find the Gonka people. Wang Chong waved his hand from atop his white-hoofed shadow, his expression calm and composed. But there's no need. Wang Chong calmly said. No matter what he did, Wang Chong always had his own reasons for doing it. But there was no need to explain all this to Yang Hongchang. Marquis, the scouts up ahead have reported that there are people blocking our path. They should be the Gonka people. At this moment, a Han general galloped up and whispered into Wang Chong's ear. This general looked similar to Wang Chong's personal guards, but he was wearing the armor of the Qixi Protectorate. Under the leadership of Foman Linta, there weren't many Han who could reach the rank of general in the Qixi Protectorate. Wang Chong had only found this general through the name list of the Qixi Protectorate. This person was called Xue Qianjun. He was originally a commandant who had served the Qixi Protectorate for 15 years. Even though he had made many contributions, he had never been promoted. After Wang Chong found him, he made an exception and promoted him to a general, commanding the Han soldiers of the Qixi Protectorate. As the Qixi Protector General, Wang Chong wielded unimaginable authority. For an exception to promote a commandant to a general, Wang Chong didn't even need the approval of the royal court or the Bureau of Military Personnel. All he had to do was to write a letter and report it to the royal court. Oh, don't clash with them yet. Wait for me. Wang Chong's eyes flashed, and he suddenly patted his steed and galloped toward the source of the conflict. In just a few breaths, Wang Chong immediately saw the enemies that Xue Qianjun spoke of. These were the typical natives of the western regions. Compared to the burly natives of the western regions, they were much shorter, only around 6 to 7 chi tall. Their bodies didn't look as muscular, and they were covered in dust as if they hadn't bathed in 6 to 7 years. Even their hair was matted, but the most unbearable of all was the stench emanating from their bodies. When Wang Chong was still 6 to 7 zhang away, he could already smell the stench. Chapter 860. But even so, no one dared to underestimate these Gonka people. Even the scouts from the Qixi Protectorate sent by Wang Chong were very cautious, not daring to act rashly. The reason was very simple, their eyes. Even though their clothes were ragged and they reeked like beggars, these Gonka people had a pair of extremely fierce and terrifying eyes, like those of hungry wolves. Anyone who saw these eyes would have no doubt that these people were extremely dangerous. They could sacrifice their lives for an insignificant target at any time, fighting fiercely with you and dying together with you. They really are just as the legends say. The corners of Wang Chong's lips curled up slightly. Instead of being alarmed, he was delighted. The Gonka people were the most marginalized small tribe in the western regions, and they were known as the filthy wild boars. But in Wang Chong's understanding, they had another name that would resound throughout the western regions, the King of Mercenaries. This was the most vicious, most battle-hardened, most loyal, and most reliable mercenary tribe in all the countries of the western regions. Just like the soldiers of the Mamelukes, they were known as the King of Soldiers and King of Slaughter of the Abbasid Caliphate. They were machines born for war. The Gonka people were known as the filthy wild boars. They lacked water, food, and clothing. They lived in the most barren areas, and they were discriminated against and oppressed by various tribes. It was precisely this environment that created their fierce, wolf-like character. Because of the barren resources, they had no weapons or armor, and they couldn't afford to raise war horses. As a result, in the eyes of the countries of the western regions, they were weak, unsuited for war, and unsuitable for employment. Especially in the western regions, where cavalry was the main force, the Gonka people couldn't even afford to raise war horses, which was extremely fatal. As a result, no one would hire Gonka people. Because of this, the Gonka people were always struggling on the edge of life and death. In the western region where competition was fierce and survival was cruel, many small tribes like this disappeared every year. But in the end, the Gonka people relied on their own tenacious struggle to survive. Moreover, they relied on one cruel and intense battle after another. Their strong and indisputable performance earned them the title of King of Mercenaries. They were loyal and reliable. Their style of fighting to the last man and never retreating won everyone's respect and recognition. In this war, just the 5,000 Wuxian cavalry and the soldiers of Qixi were far from enough. Wang Chong needed a large number of mercenaries, and they had to be loyal and reliable. They were not like the Karluks. Although they were now known as the strongest mercenary tribe in the western regions, they would betray them at any time for the sake of a small profit. This was not what Wang Chong wanted. The more such mercenaries he recruited, the more harm he would suffer in the end. In Wang Chong's eyes, of the countless mercenary tribes in the western regions, only the Gonka people were truly reliable and could serve as his right and left arms. Congratulations to user for unlocking the mission King of Mercenaries. The Gonka people are small tribes of the western regions. They are known as filthy wild boars, the future King of Mercenaries. They are despicable and live like worms on the edge of the harsh environment, but they are proud and suspicious of all outsiders. If you want to truly obtain their help, you must make them feel true respect from the bottom of your heart. They will be your most honest allies in the future, never betraying you, never becoming your enemy. Mission success will be rewarded with 1,200 points of destiny energy. Mission failure will result in a deduction of 4,400 points of destiny energy. Note, this mission is dangerous. If you let the Gonka people feel your contempt, they will become your mortal enemies for life. Then, everything became silent. There was no more sound. Wang Chong's eyes widened as he reined in the reins, inwardly astonished. The Stone of Destiny would actually issue a notice at a time like this. Interesting. The Stone of Destiny rarely issued missions of its own accord. In terms of strength and numbers, the Gonka people were a fringe tribe that had little sense of existence in the western regions. But for the Stone of Destiny to issue a mission worth 1,200 points of destiny energy, it was clear that even the Stone of Destiny recognized the weight of this future King of Mercenaries tribe. Mortal enemies? That's not a small price to pay. As this thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind, he quickly urged his horse forward. Up ahead, the Qixi scout was still in a stalemate with the Gonka people. But without Wang Chong's order, these scouts clearly did not dare to act on their own. When Wang Chong reached the front, the scout very naturally moved to the side, and the filthy and disheveled Gonka people understood that Wang Chong was their leader, and subconsciously raised their heads. "We have come with goodwill," a voice suddenly rang out in the ears of the Gonka people. It was not Wang Chong, but the scholarly robed and elegant figure of one Shuyang, riding a large horse. His demeanor was relaxed, causing others to subconsciously lower their guard and feel a sense of closeness. The language of the Gonka people was a minority language in the western regions. Other than themselves, very few people knew how to speak it. Not even Wang Chong knew how to speak it. Although Yang Hongchang had operated in the western regions for many years, not even he knew how to speak it. In the entire Tang dynasty, there was probably only one master, one Shuyang, who was well versed in the languages of the various kingdoms of the western regions. This is a small token of our appreciation. We hope that you will accept it. One Shuyang clasped his hands and bowed, glancing at Wang Chong. Seeing the latter nod, he gestured behind him. In the next moment, a few well-built warriors of the Qixi Protectorate walked up from behind, carrying a few large bamboo baskets. The bamboo lids of the baskets were opened. Inside were baskets of wheat flour, corn kernels, grapes, guavas, honeydew melons, and various meats. Food. Seeing these things, a few Gonka people uttered a vague sound. Their eyes lit up, obviously attracted by the food. Some of the Gonka people could not help but lick their lips subconsciously. The hostility in their eyes was reduced by a lot. What Mr. Yuan said was right. When Wang Chong saw this, he secretly nodded. Yuan Shusong was a linguist of his generation, and he was even more experienced in the western region. He had spent most of his life in the western region. He had been to every place and every tribe, and he had a deep understanding of them. In this aspect, even Yang Hongchang could not compare. This time, It was Wen Shuyang's suggestion to use food instead of gold, to communicate with them first before negotiating with them. Only Wen Shuyang could take into account these detailed aspects. Reality had proven that this method was indeed effective. What do you want? We the Gonka people have nothing to offer you. One of the Gonka people immediately stepped forward to negotiate with Wen Shuyang. This food is just a small token of our appreciation. It's also a gift for our first meeting. This time, we're here to ask for your help. This is our leader. Wen Shuyang spoke in a refined manner. As he spoke, he turned his head to look at Wang Chong beside him. His unique temperament had taken effect. The rejection of the few Gonka people became weaker. They were no longer as hostile as before. Please tell your leader that I want to hire the Gonka people as my allies. At this moment, Wang Chong suddenly spoke. He did not speak in the language of Middle-earth. Instead, he spoke in the language of the Gonka people. This was something that Wang Chong had learned from Wen Shuyang. If you agree, we can provide the Gonka people with generous rewards. Pa! Wang Chong made a gesture, and another basket was opened. However, this time it was not filled with food. Instead, it was filled with gold. When the dazzling gold light shone out, the expressions of the few Gonka people changed. The living conditions of the Gonka people were harsh. They had never seen such a large amount of gold. Wait a moment. I'll go and ask the leader. One of the Gonka people did not say anything else. He immediately turned around and left. They watched as he dashed away and entered a small tent in the distance. Wang Chong and Wen Shuyang exchanged glances. Neither of them said anything. If there were no surprises, that should be the place where the king of Gonka lived. I wonder if it's that person. A thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind as he rode the white-hoofed shadow and gazed at the clusters of shabby tents. Heroes were created by the times. The world was filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. It was not as simple as people thought. Just like the outbreak of the apocalypse, the Central Plains first discovered that the world's #1 cavalryman Wuxia was hiding in a barren mountain village in the northwest with only mountains and trees. In the western regions, there were also existences that made people raise their eyebrows. Before they could truly reveal their abilities, they were looked down upon by everyone. But when a calamity swept across the world, no one could hide themselves anymore. Everyone's secrets would be exposed. The king of Gonka was the most legendary existence that Wang Chong knew of in the western regions. Back in the day, Wang Chong was known as the War Sage. He was the most legendary existence in the Central Plains. Wang Chong had used his own life and blood to forge a legend that belonged to him. However, even though he was known as the War Sage, Wang Chong and the king of Gonka of the western regions had never met. They did not have much interaction. The reason was simple. This king of Gonka had fallen during the early stages of the calamity. The Gonka people were brave, fierce, fearless, and loyal. Even in the most disadvantageous of situations, they would never retreat and would fight to the last man. This was their strength and the respect of others. But at the same time, it was also their weakness. They were used by others. In the end, the entire Gonka people died in battle. Orphans and widows were also taken by other tribes after the men died. All the wealth that the tribe had accumulated was taken away. Since Wang Chong had been reborn, he naturally would not allow such a thing to happen again. Moreover, with the Battle of Talas at hand, Wang Chong needed powerful allies who could fight fiercely and would not betray him. Tap, tap, tap. The Gonka people left as quickly as they came. In just a few moments, they had arrived in front of Wang Chong's group. Chapter 861. Wen Shuyang was dumbfounded. He had never expected that the leader of the Gonka people would reject them so cleanly, without even showing his face or meeting them. Wen Shuyang turned to look at Wang Chong, not knowing what to say. The other party had clearly refused to make contact. No matter how many methods of persuasion they had, it was useless. Wang Chong also raised his eyebrows, but he was not too surprised. As expected of the arrogant king of mercenaries, Wang Chong smiled inwardly. He did not care too much. The king of Gonka's arrogance was famous in later generations. Although the Gonka people were mercenaries of the western regions, not everyone would accept the offer. Everyone was dressed in Han Chinese attire. It would be strange if the Gonka people agreed to it for the first time. It's all right. These are for you. Mr. Yuan, let's go. Wang Chong smiled and waved his hand. Under Wen Shuyang's stunned gaze, he turned and walked into the distance. Behind him, the 5,000 soldiers of the Qixi Protectorate also slowly moved away from the Gonka tribe. Marquis, are we really going to leave just like that? Wen Shuyang had an embarrassed expression on his face, unable to let go of the grudge in his heart. He had been summoned by Wang Chong this time, thinking that he could provide some help. The name of young Ho Zhongyi was well known throughout the world. Although Wen Shuyang was much older than him, he still greatly admired this descendant of the 9th young master. However, he had not expected to suffer such a setback on his first apprenticeship. Don't worry, the Gonka people will definitely agree. However, haste makes waste. We've already conveyed our goodwill the first time, and that's enough. Next we'll just wait and see. As he said this, the corners of Wang Chong's mouth curled up in a meaningful smile. Report. As soon as Wang Chong said that, a scout from the Qixi Protectorate arrived on a warhorse. My lord, there are more than 2,000 targets up ahead, heading toward the territory of the Gonka. Target. Hearing this, Wen Shuyang looked confused, and subconsciously turned to look at Wang Chong. It seemed that Wang Chong had arranged more things than he had imagined. Haha, Mr. Yuan, don't worry. Let's wait and see. As Wang Chong spoke, he waved his hand, and the 5,000-strong army immediately stopped several thousand feet away from the Gonka people's territory. In just a few breaths of time, everyone heard the dense sound of horse hooves in the next moment. Under everyone's gaze, a tribe of more than 2,000 barbarians from the western region, with hooked noses, deep-set eyes, and disheveled hair, charged towards the Gonka people's territory while waving their swords, spears, and clubs. This tribe of more than 2,000 barbarians had obviously noticed Wang Chong and the rest when they were halfway there. However, they only laughed and continued to charge unscrupulously towards the Gonka people's territory. The Saka. Wen Shuyang's eyelids suddenly twitched as he recognized them. The Saka were a very powerful nomadic tribe in the western region, and they were divided into many tribes. Their biggest characteristic was their tall physique, extremely thick bones, and extremely aggressive nature. The people of this tribe had a habit of using lime to draw an iron fork mark on the right side of their warhorses. The Saka loved to bully the weaker tribes. In the western region, they had destroyed countless small tribes. My lord, let's continue watching. Wang Chong smiled. He already knew what Wen Shuyang was going to say. In the distance, the sound of horse hooves could be heard. The 2,000 Saka had already penetrated deep into the Gonka people's territory. A group of Gonka people quickly gathered and confronted the Saka. Due to the distance, it was impossible to hear what they were saying. However, it was clear that the Gonka people were very agitated. They were waving their arms and saying something, but their actions only made the Saka laugh loudly. Marquis, the Saka have always been domineering and like to enslave other weak tribes. They often kidnap the cattle, sheep, and horses of other tribes. The Gonka people have always been lacking in food. I'm afraid. Wen Shuyang turned his head to look at Wang Chong. However, before he could finish, a shrill scream came from behind him. Wen Shuyang's body trembled. He turned his head and saw several Gonka people being pierced by halberds. The Saka, who had just been laughing loudly, suddenly charged into the Gonka people's territory and began a massacre. Xiao xiao xiao. The Saka had clearly come prepared. Arrows rained down on the Gonka people. The others rode their horses and became one with them. They brandished their weapons, spears, and clubs as they slaughtered the Gonka people in a frenzy. The Gonka people were unarmed and starving. They were no match for the Saka. Screams rang out incessantly. Marquis, listen to my orders, Wang Chong said calmly. A moment later, an earth-shattering roar erupted from a tent in the center of the Gonka people's territory. The aura was terrifying. Before the Saka could even get close, they were sent flying with their horses. The aura was so strong that even Wang Chong and the others' horses, thousands of meters away, were frightened and neighed nay. So powerful. Who is this? How can he be so powerful? This person is at least in the Saint Martial realm. I didn't expect the Gonka people to have such a terrifying expert. That all the generals of the Qixi Protectorate beside Wang Chong were deeply shocked, their eyelids twitching. When they first met the Gonka people, they were dirty and smelly, just like beggars. They didn't think much of them, but no one expected such an expert to be hidden among the Gonka people. The king of Gonka is finally here. Wang Chong narrowed his eyes and looked into the distance, his eyes full of anticipation. Wang Chong had some understanding of the relationship between the Saka and the Gonka people. Just as Wen Shuyang had said, the two tribes had a slave and subordinate relationship. The Gonka people were small tribes under the Saka, and they often had to offer cattle, sheep, and horses to the Saka, and the Saka used this method to control the growth of the Gonka people. But the Gonka people were not without a fight. Their leader, the king of Gonka, was the biggest variable. He was an extremely terrifying, hidden Saint Martial realm expert. In the distance, as the aura exploded, the tent was torn apart, and a slender, heroic-looking Gonka people wearing animal skins walked out. His eyes were piercingly cold and contained a murderous aura. The Saka, who were charging around unstoppably, immediately became as weak as ants in front of him. Chia Kripa, enjoy this to the fullest, chia chia chia. The king of Gonka's eyes were like lightning, and his furious voice was like thunder, shaking the area for several li, causing the horses to neigh in fright. Even though Wang Chong already knew about the king of Gonka, he couldn't help but be shocked when he saw his astonishing aura. This was a real lion. What did he say? Wang Chong turned his head to look at Wen Shuyang. The leader of the Gonka people is angry, and ordered them to retreat immediately. Wen Shuyang said, looking into the distance. This conflict had completely attracted his attention. Wen Shuyang had traveled the western region in his early years, and had also come into contact with the Gonka people. But he had never known that they had such a formidable character. The stellar energy around the king of Gonka was as dazzling as lightning, making him seem like a god. Asaralu Kalayasilala. On the other side, the Saka were completely unconcerned by the powerful king of Gonka. Several of the powerful Saka leaders of Qixi surrounded the king of Gonka and harshly cursed. Those Saka are threatening the Gonka leader. If he dares to attack, he will kill all the Gonka people. Wen Shuyang immediately translated. The Saka's threat was clearly effective. The king of Gonka appeared to be very apprehensive, and his boundless aura had been greatly restrained, as if he was afraid of harming the innocent. Pass on my order. We can begin. Wang Chong faintly smiled and waved his hand. Rumble. There was a heaven-shaking boom. And a moment later, while the Gonka people and the Saka were facing off, the 5,000 Qixi Protectorate behind Wang Chong moved out. Clang clang clang. Thousands of war halos shot out of their feet like the most dazzling of flames. And then the 5,000 soldiers surged like a surging tide toward the territory of the Gonka people. 5,000 fully armed people charged forward together. That kind of powerful killing intent immediately attracted the attention of the two opposing sides. It's the Qixi Protectorate. What do they want to do? Have the Tang people forgotten the rules? What does the matter between us and the Gonka people have to do with them? Have a few people go and negotiate with them. We've worked with the Tang people before. The Saka immediately turned around and charged toward Wang Chong's group. They tried to stop the 5,000 Qixi Protectorate, but what awaited them were sharp blades. Hiss! A cold light flashed and blood spurted. The Saka opened their mouths, and before they could make a sound, their heads were separated from their bodies. They fell from their war horses, and blood spurted all over the ground. Seeing this, all the Saka were stunned. No one expected that the Tang dynasty's army would actually dare to attack them, and to help the filthy wild boars of the western region. These bastards, they actually dare to attack us. How dare they break the rules? Kill them. The Saka's eyes were bloodshot. No matter how slow they were to react, they knew that the Tang people were coming for them. In just an instant, blood gushed up their heads, and their faces turned red. They waved their weapons, roared, and charged toward the 5,000 Qixi Protectorate. Chapter 862. Boom. With a loud bang, the Gonka people watched in shock as the 2,000 Saka, and the 5,000 Chishi Protectorate soldiers crashed into each other like a black tide. Miserable cries rang out incessantly. The people of the Sai race fell off their horses one after another. Although the Saka were one of the strongest mercenary tribes in the western region, they were no match for the fully armed Tang dynasty soldiers. Wang Chong did not even use any of his abilities in this wave of attacks. With just one wave of attacks, the 2,000 Saka were immediately scattered. Only a few dozen survived. The ground was covered with corpses. Although the Chishi Protectorate was not as strong as Wang Chong's Wuxiang Iron Cavalry, they were still well-trained and forged through blood on the cruel battlefield. It was too easy for them to deal with these mercenaries. Run! Report to the chief. You Tang people will regret this. That the Saka who were lucky enough to survive fled in all directions. Don't chase a cornered enemy. Come back. Wang Chong said lightly. Marquis, the chief of the Gonka people is here. Suddenly, a scout from the Chishi Protectorate whispered into Wang Chong's ear. Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat. He turned his head to look. Half of the Gonka people's territory was dead silent. Pairs of eyes looked over from all directions and landed on Wang Chong and the 5,000 Chishi Protectorate soldiers. At the front of the Gonka people's territory, a middle-aged man with eyes as sharp as lightning was walking towards Wang Chong. Why are you helping us? This was the first sentence the king of Gonka said. His eyes were cautious as he carefully sized up Wang Chong. He did not look as happy as he imagined. Wen Shuyang opened his mouth, wanting to say something but hesitating. Do you know that your help has brought disaster to me? The king of Gonka continued. He looked at Wang Chong, and what came out of his mouth was actually fluent Han Chinese. The Chishi officers around Wang Chong paled at these words. How dare you? We helped you. Yet you're blaming us? What an ungrateful person. No one had expected that this would be the result of helping the Gonka people kill the Saka people. Wang Chong chuckled and raised an arm to stop the crowd. Since that's the case, why did the leader retaliate just now? Just let the Saka take away all the cows and sheep. Why do we need to resist? This is our own business, you don't have to worry about it. The king of Gonka's expression changed. Leader, you've already made your choice. Why did you lie to yourself? Wang Chong rested his hand on the saddle unperturbed. The Tang people are friends, not enemies. Why is the leader so nervous? Moreover, the leader speaks fluent Han Chinese. You should have studied in the capital in your early years. The leader should know the style of the Tang people. If the Gonka people wish to make a comeback and escape the fate of being enslaved by the Saka, we are the best choice for the leader. The Gonka king's eyes widened in shock at the words traveling. He carefully examined Wang Chong, as if he was meeting this young general of the Tang dynasty for the first time. Wang Chong only smiled. It was impossible for a Gonka people to give birth to such a heroic man. In fact, the translucent jade pendant on his waist was more than enough proof. It was a typical Han jade pendant. This was also the reason why Wang Chong chose the Gonka people as his ally. I don't know what you're talking about, but the situation in the western region isn't as simple as you Tang people think. The Saka have tens of thousands of soldiers. You shouldn't have let them go just now. They'll only attract more people. The king of Gonka said. Then I'll just kill all the people they attract. Wang Chong said casually. His tone naturally revealed the disdain of a superior. The king of Gonka trembled as he carefully examined the young man on the horse. This Tang people teenager looked very young. He was 16 years old, and couldn't be older than 17. This was very rare among the Tang people. The king of Gonka had indeed traveled in the capital of the Tang dynasty, and met many big shots, but he had rarely seen such a young leader. What he was most concerned about was the teenager's eyes. They were deep, disdainful, and the overall situation was under his control. That unmoving aura was definitely not something an ordinary general could have. There's no way to kill them all. The Saka are endless. They have a huge force here. The king of Gonka said. Then we'll just kill all the Saka. That'll solve the problem. Wang Chong said casually. His expression was calm, but the light that shone from his eyelids made people's hearts palpitate. Who the hell are you? The king of Gonka's heart was beating wildly. He finally couldn't say anything else. He realized that the identity of this teenager from the Tang people was far more mysterious than he had imagined. He wanted to easily wipe out a powerful tribe that had hundreds of years of history in the western region, easily erasing it. If it were someone else, they would only be considered a madman. But Wang Chong's tone and expression made it impossible to treat him as a joke. Moreover, the 5,000 soldiers of the Qixi Protectorate reeking of blood were enough to make anyone treat Wang Chong's words with great caution. You Gonka people are too ignorant and inexperienced. You don't even recognize our lord. He's Qixi Protector General, the son of Heaven's disciple, the young marquis of the Tang dynasty. Behind Wang Chong, Xue Qianjun shook the reins and urged his horse forward. Qixi Protector General, the king of Gonka's body trembled in shock. No matter how ignorant and inexperienced he was, no matter how remote the territory of the Gonka people was, he still knew that two major figures whose names had recently shaken the western regions, the Black Wolf Yabgua Gudalan and the Izan Brigadier General Dian Mangpoch, had died in the short span of a few months at the hands of a youth from the Tang dynasty called Wang Chong. Moreover, this Wang Chong had replaced the unyielding and domineering Fomin Linta to ascend to the position of Qixi Protector General. It was rumored that Fomin Linta had not relinquished his position willingly or unwillingly, but that he had lost to Wang Chong in a struggle. In short, there were many legends about him, each one extremely mysterious. The king of Gonka had never imagined that the youngest protector general of the Tang dynasty would appear before him. So it was him. The king of Gonka's mind was deeply shaken. He had been waiting for a chance for many years. If he could obtain the help of the Tang dynasty's Qixi Protector General and the tens of thousands of Tang soldiers, the Gonka people might truly be able to break free from the slavery of the Saka and change the humiliating status of the Gonka people that had remained unchanged for centuries. Rumble, just as they were deep in thought, the earth suddenly shook like a sieve. At the same time, a frenzied aura appeared in everyone's perception. Wang Chong and the king of Gonka turned their heads and saw howls coming from the west, dust rising into the air. Through the dust, they could see tens of thousands of people approaching. The Saka, the king of Gonka's words had unfortunately come true. Those fleeing match participants had sent the news back, summoning the true Saka army. The Gonka king's heart sank at the sight of the Saka army that seemed to cover the heavens and earth. He had never worried about his own safety, but for his people. Xue Qianjun, distribute the weapons and armor you've prepared to them. At this moment, a voice rang out in the king of Gonka's ears. Xue Qianjun and several dozen Qixi Protectorate soldiers strode forward and threw metal chests in front of the king of Gonka. The chests opened to reveal countless sets of armor and gleaming weapons in the distance. Tens of thousands of Saka soldiers were charging in like a tsunami. However, at the forefront of the army was a pure white Saka steed. On its back was a Saka leader in his 30s, his muscles bulging and his back covered in scars from swords and sabers. People of the Tang dynasty, we Saka have never had any grudges with you. So why are you helping the Gonka people kill our people? The Saka leader led a few of his subordinates and flew over. He ignored the king of Gonka and stared straight at Wang Chong. His gaze was fierce and filled with murderous intent. The Saka were the strongest among the mercenaries, so they were not afraid of even the government army. Heh. Wang Chong's lips curled into a smile as he slowly urged his horse forward. Under the gazes of countless people, he finally revealed his true purpose for coming here. Because I want to borrow you Sai people to pass on a message. All the fickle mercenary tribes have only one path, death. That's what will happen to the Saka. Wang Chong's words were deafening and everyone was stunned. Even the king of Gonka was shocked. He had always thought that Wang Chong was here for him. But only now did he realize that Wang Chong's real target was not him, but the powerful Saka. All was silent, and as everyone watched, Wang Chong's energy began to surge, his entire body exploding with a powerful aura. As he stared at the sea of Saka, the smile on his lips slowly faded, his expression turning cruel and callous. The Saka. This was an extremely powerful mercenary tribe in the western regions, but their weaknesses were as obvious as their strengths. They were fickle and untrustworthy. When they accepted a job, As long as the other party offered a higher price, they could tear up the contract at any time and help the enemy deal with the original employer. It was through this method that the Saka had repeatedly amassed so much wealth that they had developed to their current level. In the Battle of Talas, Wang Chong would be facing a flood of Arabs. They were not only powerful, but also outnumbered the Tang dynasty's army in the western regions. If Wang Chong wanted to defeat them, he would need to recruit a large number of loyal mercenaries, not the Karluks or the even more shameless Saka. A betrayal on the battlefield would be a fatal blow. Chapter 863. Bastard. No leader of the Tang dynasty has ever dared to say such a thing. You will regret your words today. When the leader of the Saka heard this, he was so angry that his whole body trembled. His face darkened. After saying this, he immediately turned around and left. Kill! Behind him, tens of thousands of Saka cavalry roared like a tsunami. Their eyes were bloodshot, and they were filled with murderous intent as they charged forward. The times had changed. In the past, the Saka would have never dared to recklessly declare war on the Tang dynasty, or at least not so decisively. But everything had changed. Great General Gao Xianji of the 4 garrisons of Anxi had led more than 70,000 foreign and Han soldiers, including more than 30,000 of the Anxi Protectorate army, into Talas. The map of the western regions had already changed. This was an era of change, and a single Qixi protector general was not enough to make the Saka fear him. After all, this was their home. Rumble. The war horses got closer and closer, their heavy hooves stomping on everyone's hearts, placing a heavy pressure on them. All the Gonka people had already donned the armor that Wang Chong had delivered, taken up their weapons, and gathered behind the king of Gonka. A short distance away, the 5,000 soldiers of the Qixi Protectorate army were standing in formation, motionless and imposing like a mountain. A storm was brewing, and all of them understood that they were facing an unprecedentedly powerful foe. This was a battle where they had a massive disparity in numbers. 200 steps, 100 steps, 50 steps, they were getting closer and closer. Kill! The tens of thousands of Saka viciously roared at the same time. But just when their morale was at its peak, Wang Chong faintly smiled and finally struck out at the overwhelming number of enemies. Boom! Halos clattered and clattered, and in the blink of an eye, one blazing halo after another shot out of Wang Chong's body and engulfed the battlefield. The bane of the battlefield halo. A white light flashed, and in the blink of an eye, Wang Chong's bane of the battlefield aura, which had reached the peak of the 3rd tier, burst out of his body. Like a storm, it enveloped all the Saka. Clang clang clang. Under everyone's shocked gazes, the tens of thousands of Saka cavalry were like a punctured ball, their cultivation level dropping again and again, instantly weakening to an unbelievable level. At that moment, all the Saka people turned as pale as paper, while all the Gonka people were energized. Kill! In an instant, like a landslide, all the Gonka people along with the 5,000 Qixi Protectorate swarmed out, charging towards the Saka army that was in chaos. In this world, other than the best cavalry, no one could resist the 3 layers of the bane of the battlefield aura, including the Saka. Faced with the combined attack of the 5,000 Qixi Protectorate and the Gonka people, the 30,000 Saka soldiers were completely routed. Amidst the blood-curdling screams, blood flowed like rivers, and corpses were strewn everywhere. 3 days later, a piece of news shocked the entire western regions. The Saka, one of the most powerful mercenary tribes of the western regions, had been defeated by the joint attack of the Tang dynasty's Qixi Protectorate and the Gonka people. The Tang dynasty's fervent supporters of the Gonka people had swept through all the Saka tribes. The Saka men were killed, the women and children taken away, and all the cattle, sheep, and war horses taken away by the Gonka people. The Gonka people, who had always been called filthy boars by the tribes of the western regions, displayed formidable fighting power in their battle against the Saka. They were vicious, tenacious, and fearless of death, completely different from the image of the prime minister. Equipped with armor, weapons, and war horses, not even the Saka were a match for them in a one-on-one battle. This left all the mercenary tribes of the western region stunned. And what shocked these mercenary tribes the most was the words that the Chishi Protector General standing behind the Gonka people had released through the deaths of the Saka. The Saka were exterminated because of their capriciousness and treachery. In the western region, if there were any mercenary tribes that did not abide by their contract and casually betrayed their employer, then the Saka would end up like them. As the news spread, countless mercenary tribes trembled in fear, and those mercenary tribes that had crossed the line were all panicking. The mercenary tribes of the western regions, which had been in a state of chaos, were now deeply intimidated by this matter. At the same time, the rapid rise of the Gonka people made other mercenary tribes see a massive opportunity. After the extermination of the Saka, their treasures, women, and cattle were not taken away by the Tang people, but given to the Gonka people who had helped the Tang people. Danger and opportunity coexisted, and Wang Chong's sudden appearance made the mercenary tribes of the western regions see something different. As time slowly passed, Wang Chong, Li Sai, Chen Bin, Cheng Sanyuan, Su Shixian, Zhao Jingdian, Su Yiqin. All of them were like different parts of a war machine, all of them madly operating in preparation for the upcoming battle with the Arabs. The entire world was silent, but in the depths of this silence, there seemed to be a clap of thunder. In the distant northwest, to the west of the northern border of the Uzun Plateau, in Greater and Lesser Balar. Boom! In front of the city was a towering black city. In front of the city was a towering cliff, and behind it were craggy cliffs. But all of a sudden a loud noise was heard. The city gate of the easternmost city of Little Balar abruptly opened, and the drawbridge that was rarely lowered was lowered. The drawbridge, more than 1 zhang wide and 10 some zhang long, rumbled to the other side of the cliff, connecting the two sides. In just a short while, along with a series of rolling sounds, coal-black carts dragged out from the city gate, fully loaded with Hyderabad ores. Around these carriages were swarmed Sindhi monks, their bodies covered in grime. Behind them were Kong Xian and his 1,000 Wuxian cavalry. The armor on their bodies was crisscrossed and covered with deep and shocking scars made by swords and sabers. There were even gaps and cracks in many places. Through the cracks, one could see that the insides were black, as if they had fallen into a mine full of silt. Compared to when they had first arrived, Kong Xian and the others did not have a complete set of armor on them. It seemed like they had experienced countless battles of life and death. Everyone had injuries on their bodies, and their expressions were haggard. However, their eyes were still bright, and their spirit was like an inextinguishable flame. "We're finally back." As he gazed at the distant Uzun Plateau, Kong Xian gave a long sigh. Only he knew what they had experienced in these 20-some days, as they ventured deep into Sindhu. As he gazed at the slowly rising sun in the east, Kong Xian felt like he was seeing the light of day once more. "Let's go. General is still waiting for us on the plateau." Kong Xian pointed his sword forward and said to the army behind him. With these last words, Kong Xian suddenly squeezed the horse's abdomen, and with a jia, he galloped forward. Behind him, the 1,000 Wuxian cavalry followed closely. The 1,000 Wuxian cavalry and 80-some Sindhi monks charged forward in a grand and dusty procession. Behind them, in the Black City, countless figures watched them depart, their faces brimming with respect. In this period of time, only they knew what kind of legend this Tang people army had left behind in the northern Sindhu and Greater and Lesser Balar, and what kind of miracles they had created. These are true heroes. The muscular city lord looked in the direction of the departing group and took off his helmet. With a solemn expression, he gave a respectful bow. This was a show of respect for true heroes. On the northern border of the Uzun Plateau, banners fluttered in the wind. Li Sai rode on his Fergana steed, as motionless as a mountain. In these 20-some days, Li Sai had silently waited with his 1,000 men, not moving at all. "My lord, they're here." Suddenly, a pleasantly surprised voice called out. Li Sai's heart skipped a beat as he followed the direction of the scout's finger. At the bottom of the plateau, a meandering convoy was slowly moving towards them. Li Sai immediately recognized the person leading the convoy. "It's Kong Xian." After standing on the plateau for so many days, exposed to the elements, Li Sai was like a rock, his face unchanging. But when he saw Kong Xian's convoy, a hint of joy appeared on Li Sai's face. Hyderabad ore. Only Li Sai and Kong Xian deeply understood what this special, or from the distance Sinda meant to Wang Chong, and his 5,000 Wuxian cavalry. A Wuxian cavalry that lacked Wuxi steel weapons could not truly be considered the world's best cavalry. Without these invincible and terrifyingly sharp weapons, the Wuxian cavalry would not be able to display their full strength, and they would not be able to reverse the tides in the battle to the west of the Tsong Mountains and deal with those unprecedentedly powerful foes. Of all these things, the Hyderabad ore, which could be used to forge Wuxi steel weapons, held the greatest strategic significance, and it was also what Wang Chong valued the most. Li Sai had been waiting here for a long time, silently waiting for this scene before him. Kong Xian, you've worked hard. Marquis will definitely be very happy to see this. Li Sai rushed over and placed a heavy hand on Kong Xian's shoulder. Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. Kong Xian got down on one knee and respectfully said. Li Sai's eyes were bright as he carefully examined Kong Xian and the 1,000 Wuxian cavalry behind him. Compared to when they had set off, all of them were much thinner, darker, and more capable. However, they were also much stronger, possessing a will of steel. Li Sai nodded in satisfaction. He had always wanted to find a chance to temper Kong Xian and temper his abilities, so that he could become even more outstanding, so that he could stand on his own in the army. It seemed that he had succeeded in this mission. Chapter 864. Let's go. Marquis is definitely getting impatient from waiting. He'll definitely be very happy to hear this news. Li Sai said. 6,000 Jun of Hyderabad, or was equivalent to 6,000 invincible Wuxi steel swords, more than enough to equip 5,000 Wuxian cavalry. Qixi now had a truly terrifying force that could decide the outcome of a battle. The weight of this was not something a normal person could imagine. Rumble. The two groups of Wuxian cavalry quickly joined together and escorted the carts of Hyderabad or up the plateau, passing through the northern border of the Uzun Plateau to head toward their own territory. Not to the Qixi Protectorate, but to the City of Steel. There were many craftsmen, smiths, and even furnaces there. Zhang Shouji had even prepared a large factory, and the pine trees cut from the capital had already been sent over. Only there could the Hyderabad, or be forged into the famous Wuxi steel swords. As the 2,000 Wuxian cavalry and the massive convoy traversed the northern border of the Uzun vultures were constantly appearing and circling in the sky. At the same time, one group of Uzun scouts after another appeared in the distance and then vanished. From start to finish, Li Sai and the others ignored them, and those Uzun scouts only dared to watch from a distance, disappearing after a single glance, not daring to approach. After the Battle of the Triangular Gap, the entire northern border of the Uzun Plateau paled at the mere mention of the City of Steel and the army of Qixi. Moreover, Uzun was currently in the northern border, so it could no longer mobilize any more soldiers to deal with them. Bang! Several hours later, when Li Sai and the others escorted the 6,000 Jun of Hyderabad, or to Wuxiang's City of Steel, the entire city was in an uproar. Everyone welcomed them with a hero's welcome. Zhang Shouji, Zhao Jingdian, and even Cheng Sanyuan and Su Shixian, as well as Su Yiqin of the Qixi Protectorate, hurried over. The most important part of Wang Chong's plan had finally arrived, and it was like a stabilizing needle that calmed everyone's hearts. What? Wang Chong was in the middle of recruiting soldiers from the various mercenary tribes in the western regions. Upon hearing these words, he immediately left the recruitment to the King Gongka and Xue Qianjun and rushed to the City of Steel. Without the slightest hesitation, Wang Chong immediately used steel modules to set up a massive swordsmithing factory in the western part of the City of Steel. He then recruited more than 100 elite blacksmiths and began to forge swords of Wuxi steel. More than 6,000 Jun of Hyderabad ore. This was probably the largest Hyderabad ore transaction in the entire Central Plains, perhaps even the entire world, since Wang Chong's reincarnation. But this was not the only cause for excitement. On the Western Turkic Khaganate's side, when the 3,000 Wuxiang cavalry had swept through all the water sources and routed the 30,000 elite soldiers, destroying the Western Turkic Khaganate's forces in the Qixi region and beginning to threaten the shepherds and Turkic tribes deeper into the region, the Turkic Khaganate of Mount Sami finally responded. The Western Turks were willing to provide 200,000 high-quality Turkic warhorses in exchange for the fourth prince and the Qixi Protectorate's withdrawal from the Western Turkic region. All the warhorses would be sent to Qixi as quickly as possible. But Wang Chong and the Qixi Protectorate would have to withdraw from the Turkic steppe first, and they were not to attack any more Turkic shepherds. When this news reached the city of Steel where Wuxiang had imprisoned the Turkic fourth prince, everyone was dumbfounded. For the Turkic fourth prince to be worth so much left everyone slack-jawed. Although Hulaeg had said that the fourth prince was extremely favored, or else he would not have had the Black Wolf Yabgu personally escort him and help him gather merit. This value was still beyond everyone's expectations. I really did pick up a treasure. In the city of Steel, Suki muttered to himself. It took a long time for him to come back to his senses. He was the one who personally experienced the whole thing. He had participated in the Battle of the Qixi Armory and had even personally captured the Turkic fourth prince. Moreover, he had been the one to personally report the news of the Turkic fourth prince to Wang Chong. But 200,000 warhorses still made him feel like he was in a dream. He clearly remembered that Hulaeg had sent a letter to the city of Steel stating that the Western Turkic Khaganate's bottom line was 100,000 high-quality Turkic warhorses. And now the price was double that. Hulaeg. It must be that bastard. In a flash of inspiration, Suki suddenly recalled that fat Turkic horse merchant. That bastard had to be the one to do this. Otherwise, even if the Turkic shepherds on the Western Front were threatened and the soldiers wounded, they would never have paid such a price. This fellow is truly worthy of respect. But this was not the end of the good news. A few days later, with the rumbling of wheels, one carriage after another loaded with steel modules appeared outside the city of Steel. The cement road from the capital to Wuxiang was unprecedented in the history of the Tang dynasty, greatly reducing the time needed to transport the steel modules. With the arrival of the first caravan, a steady stream of caravans carrying countless steel modules arrived at Wuxiang's city of Steel. Everything was ready, and after nearly a month, Wang Chong's orders were gradually beginning to show their effects. Large quantities of resources, weapons and warhorses were gathering in Qixi, and even farther away, sacks of grain were being transported from Jiaoji to the capital, and then to the city of Steel. Wang Chong had sent Zhang Munian to Jiaoji to research hybrid rice, and the results were gradually beginning to show. The rice in Jiaoji could be harvested 3 times a year, and the grain produced there alone was enough to support a local war. There was no need for the Bureau of Revenue to allocate any grain. Not only that, with Wang Chong's support, Zhang Munian's research on hybrid rice began to expand from Jiaoji to other areas. Everything was progressing in a good direction. The various developments Wang Chong had painstakingly developed after the Southwestern War were gradually beginning to show their results. Cree! The shrill cry of an eagle came from the sky several li away from Wuxiang's city of Steel. The 3-foot-long eagle circled once in the sky, then immediately turned around and flew away. In the direction of the eagle's cry, one could see an Uzun scout mounted on a warhorse in the middle of the northern region of the Uzun Plateau, gazing in the direction of Wuxiang's city of Steel. From his angle, he could see thick plumes of smoke rising into the sky from the city of Steel. Countless soldiers, craftsmen, and merchants were gathered there, bustling with activity. The Tibetan scout gave all this a profound stare. After catching the eagle, he silently turned around and began to gallop into the depths of the Tibetan plateau. Translated by Hypersheep 325. A few moments later, there was a shrill cry as the massive eagle once more took to the air. This time, however, it did not fly in the direction of Qixi. Instead, it flew over the plateau toward the capital of the Yusang Empire. Time passed slowly. The giant eagle passed through the layers of dark clouds and thunderstorms. After a day, It once again flew down from the clouds. The eagle did not enter the royal capital, but flew over it and landed somewhere else. On the ground, a stalwart figure was silently waiting. "You've worked hard. Eat." A thick palm caught the eagle flying down from the sky. At the same time, the other hand tore off a large piece of meat and fed it to the huge eagle. After doing all this, Huashu Wuzong took the intelligence report from the eagle's leg. After glancing through it, he walked over and handed it to another figure. "That brat truly is the greatest foe of our Uzan Empire. As expected, he's going to take action again now that Anshi is in trouble." Dusong Mangpoj took the letter and carefully read it, his expression turning even more unsightly as he gave a deep sigh. "Alas, in the Battle of the Triangular Gap, we lost all our soldiers in the north. We no longer have the strength to threaten him. Otherwise, we would have definitely made some trouble for him." Dusong Mangpoj's face was filled with regret. As a famed general of the Uzan Empire, he had never suffered such a major defeat, even when he was in a stalemate with the Big Dipper Great General Geshuhan in Longxi, but he had lost to Qishi's Wang Chong. Now that he thought about it, he realized that he had still been too impulsive. This was the greatest shame of his life. It's too late to say these things now. We've lost, and the Western Turks have also lost. There's no one left in Qishi that can threaten him. The Tang dynasty is now the sole power. If we can't stop them, our Uzan soldiers will never be able to charge out of the plateau again. Huashu Wuzong nodded. The current development is exactly the same as what he said back then. Let's go. If we want to defeat that brat, cut off the Anshi Protectorate Army's reinforcements, and deal a heavy blow to the Tang dynasty's power in the western regions, he's the only one who can do it. A hint of respect appeared in Dusong Mangpoj's eyes as he nodded and walked with Huashu Wuzong toward a nearby steel building on the outskirts of the royal capital. In the Uzan Empire, very few buildings made of pure steel could be found, except in one place: the prison. After showing their tokens, the two great generals of the Uzan Empire began to descend the stairs into the gloomy prison. The prison was damp and gloomy, the only source of light being the torches that hung on the walls every 4 feet. In the light of the torches, the jailers pressed against the walls as if they had been petrified. Only their vicious gazes proved that they were still breathing. Huashu Wuzong and Dusong Mangpoj were in a complicated mood, but they said nothing as they followed the corridors into the depths of the prison. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. In the deepest part of the prison, in the only cell, the two saw that person. Separated by the bars of the cells, they could see that the man was sitting dejectedly, his hair disheveled and his clothes in rags. Because he hadn't washed himself for a long time, his body exuded a pungent odor, but he seemed to be completely unaware of it. He was muttering to himself, his eyes fixed on the ground, oblivious to the outside world. Chapter 865. Huashu Wuzong and Dusong Mangpoj could understand some of these things, but they could not understand the vast majority. However, when the two top generals of the Uzan Empire looked at the runes and symbols on the ground and the madman in the cell, they did not look down on him at all. Instead, their eyes were filled with respect. That was because the madman in front of them had another identity. Uzan, the prime minister of the Ngari royal family, Dalawan Ruozan. Ever since the defeat, Dalawan Ruozan had been imprisoned in the depths of this prison. Other than imperial great generals like Huashu Wuzong and Dusong Mangpoj, no one else had ever been able to touch him. Dusong Mangpoj and Dalawan Ruozan belonged to different royal lineages and rarely interacted with each other. All he knew was that Dusong Mangpoj was skilled in strategy and intelligence. When he had first met Huashu Wuzong underground, Dusong Mangpoj had not dared to believe that this disheveled prisoner, who was babbling madly and behaving strangely, was that refined and elegant prime minister of Ngari. Dusong Mangpoj had come brimming with anticipation, but he had returned disappointed. He had been deeply disappointed by Huashu Wuzong's plan to defeat Wang Chong and the Tang dynasty. Only when the Battle of Talas broke out more than a month ago did Dusong Mangpoj realize that he had been gravely mistaken. How long has the prime minister been in this state? Dusong Mangpoj summoned a jailer and asked. General, it's been more than 2 hours, and he can't hear anything. The food is still there, and he hasn't touched it. The jailer bowed and replied. Dusong Mangpoj turned his head and saw several plates of cold food by the door. Got it. You can go now. Dusong Mangpoj waved his hand to dismiss the jailer. After the jailer left, the prison became quiet again. All that was left was the sound of Daluan Ruozen's fingers moving on the ground. Dusong Mangpoj and Huashu Wuzong stood motionless outside the prison, silently watching. No one disturbed him. Perhaps if we want to defeat that young protector general of the Tang dynasty, stop the Tang dynasty in the western regions, and change the balance of power between Uzun and the Tang dynasty, we can only rely on him. As this thought flitted through Dusong Mangpoj's mind, he subconsciously turned to the right side of Daluan Ruozen. There was an extremely complicated map there, as well as some indecipherable characters. Talas. Dusong Mangpoj immediately recognized the city at the center of the map. A stranger might have believed that Daluan Ruozen was analyzing the situation at Talas, but Dusong Mangpoj knew that this map had appeared a month before the Battle of Talas. Alas, the characters around this map were the long-lost Bon language of the Uzun Plateau. Other than Daluan Ruozen, there were probably only a few people in the Uzun Empire who could recognize these ancient characters. Dusong Mangpoj was also unable to recognize them. Daluan Ruozen was defeated in the southwest and has been imprisoned for several months now. He was cut off from the outside world. Who could have imagined that, even before the Battle of Talas broke out, he had already predicted the war between Arabia and the Tang dynasty, even deducing the location of the final battle. Alas, Daluan Ruozen was imprisoned by the Tsempo. Otherwise, with his abilities, everything might have been different at the Battle of the Triangular Gap, and Dayan Mangpoj wouldn't have needed to die. A hint of sorrow appeared in Dusong Mangpoj's eyes as he thought of Dayan Mangpoj. This was probably an eternal pain in his heart. Time slowly passed, and after some time, Daluan Ruozen's body suddenly trembled. Dusong Mangpoj and Huashu Wuzong trembled, immediately knowing that Daluan Ruozen was about to awaken. You've come, Daluan Ruozen said without raising his head. Prime Minister, everything is as you expected. That youngest son of the Wang clan has defeated Fomin Linta and taken the position of Qixi Protector General. In addition, Anxi Protector General Gao Xianji has been surrounded by the Arabs. Right now, that youth of the Tang dynasty is preparing to march on Talas with all his might. Huashu Wuzong said from outside the prison. Prime Minister, are you really not going to come out? It's not time yet. Daluan Ruozen's voice resounded through the prison. He raised his head and combed through his disheveled hair, revealing a face that was somewhat pale from not seeing the sun. Although his face was haggard, his eyes were still bright and brimming with wisdom and vigor. Although he looked extremely disheveled, lacking that refined and handsome air of the past, Huashu Huaitsong knew that this was still the Ngari great minister in his memories, who could devise strategies and determine victory from 1,000 li away. Now is not the time for me to go out. Our opponent's intuition is far sharper than we imagined. The slightest movement will make him feel strange, allowing him to see through our plans and make all our efforts go to waste. Daluan Ruozen only raised his head for a moment before lowering it back down, his eyes still fixed on the area in front of him. He lightly swept the dust off the ground with his right sleeve, his movements still calm and elegant. In addition, don't call him a young man. His abilities can no longer be measured by age. If all of you only look at his age, then in the end, only defeat awaits you. Yes, Prime Minister. Huashu Wuzong lowered his head and deferentially said. Only those who knew the will in Daluan Ruozen's heart could know what he was doing. It was precisely for this reason that Huashu Wuzong felt even more respect for him. Just as Huashu Huaitsong had said, Daluan Ruozen had interacted with Wang Chong before, and had even forced him into a desperate situation. If there was one person in the entire Yusang Empire who could defeat Wang Chong, it was the great minister of the empire, who often accompanied the Tsempo in the royal capital and never ventured far from him. Daluan Ruozen was probably the only person who could defeat Wang Chong. Dusong Mangpoj, you've already come here several times. Are you still thinking about the Battle of the Triangular Gap and Dian Mangpoch's death? Daluan Ruozen's head was lowered, his fingers still drawing on the ground as he spoke. Yes, Dusong Mangpoch's expression dimmed, a hint of pain in his eyes, but he did not deny it. There is no need to worry about the gains and losses of the past. The time is not right. Even if you and I were there, in the end, we would still have lost, and the result would not have changed. Daluan Ruozen indifferently said, "But he's just a teenager. Is there really no way to defeat him?" Dusong Mangpoch said, "Haven't you already tried?" Daluan Ruozen indifferently said, his voice echoing through the ground. Dusong Mangpoch instantly fell silent. "You've tried, we've also tried, and you've seen the result. It seems like a coincidence, but it is inevitable. Do not look down on him. He has never been a person, nor can you treat him as one. He's good at borrowing power. He can use all conditions to weave a huge net with himself as the core. Weren't the two people who injured you hired by him?" Daluan Ruozen nonchalantly said. Although he was imprisoned, he gave off the feeling that he could see everything and see through everything. Dusong Mangpoch's expression grew gloomier and gloomier. He was unwilling to admit it, but his intuition told him that Daluan Ruozen was correct. The War of the Southwest, the Battle of Longxi, and the Battle of the Triangular Gap. In these three wars, we have already lost the right to challenge the Tang dynasty. This was something that could not be changed no matter what. As for the Western Turks, with the death of the Black Wolf Yabgu and Agud Alan, the Western Turks are no longer a threat. In the more than 1,000 years of campaigning with the Central Plains, the Turks have never won. The Tang dynasty is the strongest dynasty of the Central Plains. In the western regions, we can no longer defeat it. Daluan Ruozen's voice was distant and distant, his eyes seeming to see through everything. Right now, our only chance is here. Dusong Mangpoch and Huashu Wuzong followed Daluan Ruozen's demonic finger to the map of Talas on the floor of the prison. In the entire world, the only people who have not fought with the Tang dynasty are the Arabs. That will be our only chance, and also our last chance. This is the conclusion I reached after several months of research in the prison. If not even the Arabs can stop them, then in the future, the entire western regions will fall into the hands of the Tang people, and no one will be able to shake the position of the Tang people in the western regions. The prison was quiet. Neither Huashu Wuzong nor Dusong Mangpoch spoke. The two of them were so immersed in Daluan Ruozen's words that they could not speak. No one knew what sort of journey Daluan Ruozen had gone through in the last few months. Even Huashu Wuzong, who had accompanied Daluan Ruozen in the Ngari royal lineage, had been given a fright when he first saw Daluan Ruozen. His eyes and demeanor were completely different from what he remembered. It was like he had become a completely different person. But even so, Huashu Wuzong knew that he was still Daluan Ruozen. But the Daluan Ruozen in the prison had been washed clean of his past glory. He was even wiser and more terrifying than before. The deaths of more than 200,000 soldiers of the Ngari royal lineage, and the desolate steppe of the Ngari royal lineage, had created the current Daluan Ruozen. That youth in Chishi had no idea that although he had won in the southwest, he had also created an even more terrifying opponent for himself. Understood. After some time, Dusong Mangpoch's voice echoed through the ground, and he finally lowered his head in deference. This was his respect for Daluan Ruozen, his submission to Daluan Ruozen. Prime Minister, be at ease. In the future, I will do my best to cooperate with Prime Minister's actions. But I have one last problem, soldiers. Dusong Mangpoch stopped here. The problem was that even if the three of them wanted to wash away their humiliation, defeat the Tang dynasty, and restore the prestige of the Uzan Empire, they would not be able to accomplish anything with just the three of them and no soldiers. After all, this was a war, not an individual battle between experts. Chapter 866. In the War of the Southwest, the Ngari royal lineage had lost almost all of its soldiers, and in the Battle of the Triangular Gap, the soldiers of the northern border had also been wiped out. Now they had two great generals and a wise minister, but they had no soldiers under their command. This was a problem that the three of them had to resolve. There's no need for you to worry about that. I've already prepared everything. Daluan Ruozin indifferently said, apparently having predicted that Dusong Mangpoj would ask this question. As he spoke, he inadvertently shot a glance at Huashu Huaitsong outside the fence. Dusong Mangpoj's heart lurched as he turned to Huashu Wuzong. In this period of time, he and Huashu Wuzong had been inseparable. He knew exactly when Huashu Wuzong had left and what he had gone to do. He had never seen him go to see anyone, much less when he had borrowed soldiers. But Dusong Mangpoj also knew that Daluan Ruozin would never lie. I'm very sorry that I didn't tell you everything. After a few moments of silence, a hint of apology appeared in Huashu Wuzong's eyes. Before I went to see you at the Great Snow Mountain Temple, I followed Prime Minister's orders and went to see many people, finding no small number of soldiers. Our Uzin has already lost 3 battles in a row and lost many soldiers. In our campaigns against the Tang dynasty, we have basically never won. Even Zhangzheng Training Center was taken by them. Just like us, they want to change this situation, find a chance to completely crush the Tang dynasty and revitalize our Uzin. As Huashu Wuzong spoke, he turned his head to the shadows of the prison. Come out! A moment later, a stalwart figure with a long saber at his waist walked out of the shadows, his body exuding a fiendish and bloodthirsty aura. Great General Dusong, long time no see. Dusong Mangpoj's body trembled at the sight of the figure walking out of the shadows. In a flash, he seemed to understand something, and a look of relief appeared in his eyes. Several days later, early in the morning, in a forge in the western part of the city of Steel, all the craftsmen had been cleared out. All light sources had been blocked, leaving only Wang Chong standing in the forge. Around him were mountains of woozy steel swords, all of them roasting on burning pine branches. These peerless treasured swords that would make everyone crazy and infatuated in the future were still black and unremarkable. However, Wang Chong knew very well that it wouldn't be long before they turned into famous swords that glittered coldly and had magical patterns on their surfaces that looked like floating clouds and flowing water. Almost there, Wang Chong sensed the changes in temperature and humidity around him. The tempering of the woozy steel swords had strict requirements. They had to be tempered before the first rays of the morning sun shone down. There was only a moment, and Wang Chong had to grasp this opportunity. Moreover, the forging of the woozy steel swords had always been Wang Chong's secret, not just for himself, but also to prevent the Arabs from stealing them. Thus, even though Wang Chong had taught the first few steps of forging the woozy steel swords to the other craftsmen, Wang Chong had insisted on personally handling the final and most crucial steps. Buzz! With a thought from Wang Chong, boundless stellar energy surged out and wrapped around a small mountain of woozy steel swords. Whoosh! Water splashed everywhere as crimson wood steel swords were thrown into a massive metal vat at the center of the smithy. This vat was filled with a quenching fluid that only Wang Chong knew about. Plush! The moment these wood steel swords were thrown into the vat, the entire surface of the vat was covered in thick smoke. The tempering of woozy steel was extremely demanding on every step. Under normal circumstances, each woozy steel sword would require a single craftsman to work on it. But Wang Chong was different. Whether it was in the East or the West, in the history of swordsmithing, very few Saint Martial experts had ever participated in this sort of swordsmithing. This was simply too extravagant. Given Wang Chong's powerful cultivation, his understanding of temperature, humidity, and the various steps of swordsmithing, he was the only one capable of forging several hundred woozy steel swords in one go. Time slowly passed, and the smoke rising from the surface of the massive vat gradually lessened. Finally, hua! Water splashed everywhere. Under the control of Wang Chong's powerful earth energy, the swords broke through the air from the bottom of the vat and saw the light of day again. Under the weak sunlight, nearly 500 swords were like a school of sharks swimming in the air, rolling, and shuttling back and forth, reflecting rays of silvery white light. That sharp light made one feel as if their eyes were about to be split open. When the sunlight shone on the sharp edges of the swords, it seemed to be cut in half. This scene would amaze anyone who saw it. Woozy steel swords. Under the control of Wang Chong, Nearly 500 of the most precious Wuxia steel swords were finally born. In the entire world, this was something that only he could do. Success! Wang Chong's expression relaxed as he looked at the simple and unadorned Wuxia steel swords floating in the air. There was an indescribable joy in his heart. He was slowly making up for the greatest shortcoming of the Wuxian cavalry. There was no doubting the strength of the Wuxian cavalry, but without suitable weapons, they would never be able to display their full strength. This was also a sore point for Wang Chong. But the matter of the Wuxia steel swords could not be rushed. This was not an ore from the Central Plains, and there was no such ore in the entire Divine Prefecture. Even in the Hyderabad mountains where it was produced, the output of this ore was extremely low, and it was extremely difficult to mine. If not for the excellent foundation that Wang Chong had laid down, and the Sindhi's fear of losing a major customer, like Wang Chong to the Arabs, obtaining 6,000 Jun of Hyderabad, or in one go would have been impossible. With these Wuxia steel swords, I really can contend against the Abbasid Caliphate's Mamelukes. Even if I can't outnumber them, it doesn't matter. Wang Chong extended a hand and grabbed a sharp Wuxia steel sword from the air. Suki, come in. You can distribute these Wuxia steel swords to your brothers. Wang Chong didn't even raise his head as he spoke. With a whoosh, 500 Wuxia steel swords were neatly placed on the ground. After doing all this, Wang Chong turned and left. A single batch of Wuxia steel swords could only be forged each day. If he missed this period of time, no matter how strong Wang Chong was, he would not be able to forge any more. Yes, Marquis. As Wang Chong walked out, Suki, who had been standing guard this entire time, raised the curtain and quickly walked in. Congratulations to you, sir. You have been rewarded with 2,000 points of destiny energy. At this moment, a familiar voice rang out in his mind. Wang Chong was alarmed by the Stone of Destiny's warning and stopped in his tracks. What's going on here? Why would I suddenly be rewarded with destiny energy? This was not the first time Wang Chong had forged Wuxia steel swords, and this had never happened before. But Wang Chong quickly realized that he was wrong. The Stone of Destiny's reward had nothing to do with Wuxia steel swords. Nay, before Wang Chong had even left the forge, a fierce neigh resounded over the city of steel. At first, it was just one or two, but soon, thousands of warhorses neighed together. Rumble! The ground of the city of steel shook and shuddered as tens of thousands of warhorses charged toward the city of steel and surrounded it. This is... With no time to think, Wang Chong shot out of the room like a bolt of lightning. Passing through the open city gate, he saw a sea of people outside, many craftsmen having heard the commotion and come out. As Wang Chong walked out of the city, he followed the gazes of the crowd and saw thousands of steeds neighing outside the city. As far as the eye could see, it was a vast expanse like an ocean. A rough estimate put the number of warhorses outside the city at least 100,000. Ha ha ha, Marquis, I'm back. A burst of brash laughter attracted Wang Chong's attention. Hulayeg was riding a warhorse, happily waving his arms at Wang Chong. Although there were so many people outside the city, Hulayeg had still recognized Wang Chong. Gallop! Hulayeg's skillful horsemanship allowed him to gallop past one warhorse after another. When he was still 10 some zhang from the city gate, he leaped up and steadily stopped at Wang Chong's side. Marquis, I didn't disappoint you. I brought the warhorses back. Hulayeg chuckled and made a comical bow, a fawning expression on his face. I brought all 200,000 warhorses. I heard that Marquis is preparing to go to Anshi, so these warhorses should be of use. That's right, the Western Turks originally wanted to use mountain horses, but I secretly swapped them out. There are 10,000 maras and 10,000 stallions here. In the future, Marquis will be able to establish his own horse farm. Not bad. Wang Chong's eyes brightened in delight as he patted Hulayeg on the shoulder. You've truly rendered a great service this time. Just as the Central Plains had imposed a ban on the Western Turks' salt and iron trade, the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates had imposed a strict blockade on the Tang dynasty. Although warhorses could still be traded, all maras and stallions of superior quality were prohibited from being traded, and all the tribes abided by this rule. If Hulayeg really could get him some top-quality stallions and maras that hadn't been sold, then he really would be able to establish his own horse farm and breed his own war horses. Even though this wasn't an immediate project, it was something that Wang Chong had to do. And the field to the northeast of the Uzun Plateau, that he had already occupied, was the most natural place to raise horses. Suki, take some people and take over these horses. Leave behind the ones we need, and have the imperial court take over the other war horses. Hulayeg, let's go. We'll hold a celebration feast for you today. Everyone will celebrate together. Many thanks, Marquis. Chapter 867. The 200,000 war horses were quickly delivered to the city of Steel, and as promised, Wang Chong escorted the Turkic fourth prince out. The 3,000 cavalry of the Turkic steppe quickly withdrew. With this, Wang Chong had created the largest ransom transaction in the history of the western regions. Hulayeg, just how did you do it? 200,000 war horses. That's no small number. Even if that brat's entire body was made of gold, he still wouldn't be worth so much. That's right. Even Marquis was shocked to hear that there were so many war horses. You have to know that I fought with Marquis in the War of the Southwest. And even at the most intense and dangerous moments of the war, Marquis never once creased his brow. That's not all. Everyone knows that Lady Sue has always been methodical in everything she does. Who knows how many resources she's handled? That's an astronomical number. But when Lady Sue received the news, she was also shocked. The city of Steel was brightly lit, and the Wuxian cavalry and clan guards who were on good terms with Hulayeg were gathered around a table. One of the jailers asked the people of the city of Steel about the matter that everyone was most curious about. Haha, I won't tell you. That's my personal secret. Hulayeg hiccuped as he smiled and kept them in suspense. Hulayeg, just tell us. We're all brothers, so just tell us, another clan guard said. That won't do. It's a trade secret. If I told you, how could I do business in the future? Just keep on guessing. Hulayeg smugly said. The sight of Hulayeg's smug expression made the crowd gnash their teeth in anger. The group of people exchanged glances with each other, and immediately had an idea. Come. Hulayeg, you've worked hard. Let us brothers offer you a toast. Come, I also offer you a toast. Brother, I don't respect anyone but you. You've truly rendered a great service. That's right. Everyone, let's toast Hulayeg. The crowd toasted Hulayeg as they toasted him. A person was in high spirits during a joyous occasion, and Hulayeg was feeling very pleased with himself. He did not refuse any of the toasts, downing cup after cup. Gradually, Hulayeg became tipsy, burping one after another. His cheeks were red, and he was slowly getting drunk. Let me tell you, there's nothing that I can't handle in the Western Turks. For the fourth prince's matter, I've made all the necessary arrangements. In the Western Turks, I can summon the wind and summon the rain omnipotent. You. How is that possible? You must be bragging. One of the jailers immediately said, deliberately, with a face full of disbelief. Why not? Hulayeg could not stand this sort of provocation, and he immediately straightened his neck, his eyes going round. That's because you don't understand. Let me tell you, don't be fooled by Ishbara Khagan's heroic air. In truth, he was born with soft ears. I only needed to make some arrangements with the concubines in Ishbara Khagan's harem, especially the fourth prince's mother, Kaduan, and the matter was resolved. Just think about it. No matter how formidable Ishbara Khagan is, how could he endure a bunch of women constantly blowing wind into his ears? Oh, the crowd was instantly enlightened. They had believed that Hulayeg had some sort of incredible ability, but it turned out that he relied on women. This was completely different from what they had imagined. With the riddle revealed, the crowd immediately lost interest and dispersed. Hey, where are you going? I still haven't finished talking. Hulayeg called out from the back. In the distant court of the Turkic Khaganate to the west of Sanmi, with the fourth prince ascending Mount Sanmi, and meeting with the Kaduan mother and son, the matter had come to a successful conclusion. But as the 200,000 war horses left the Western Turks for Chishi, the Turkic steppe suddenly became much more spacious. Many people couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. But this was the will of the supreme Blackwater shaman, the decree of the gods. No one dared to object. However, not many people knew that when the night was deep and the sky was filled with stars, in the Khan's tent at the front of Mount Sanmi, two figures were sitting side by side. There was no light in the tent, but the two people's gazes seemed to penetrate the tent and look into the endless distance. Lord Priest, why did you have me agree to Hulaeg's offer of 200,000 warhorses? Ishbara Khagan quietly asked. There was no one in a radius of several dozen zhang around the tent. If Hulaeg had heard these words, he would have been so frightened that his soul would have left his body, and the wine in his stomach would have spilled out. He had always believed that Ishbara Khagan had agreed, because he had used the concubines in Ishbara Khagan's harem. But he had no idea that the truth was completely different from what he had imagined. Ishbara Khagan had agreed, not because of him, but because of the Blackwater shaman. Haha Khagan, don't you find that horse merchant very interesting? The Blackwater shaman's voice rang out in the darkness, tinged with a thought-provoking tone. Interesting? Ishbara Khagan creased his brow as he recalled Hulaeg's chubby and rather comical appearance. He's just a clown, an insignificant nobody. If you didn't want to keep such a person alive, I could have killed him at any time. An insignificant nobody. The Blackwater shaman shook his head. Khagan is wrong. Can an insignificant nobody save the fourth prince? This? Ishbara Khagan froze, momentarily at a loss for words. Now that he thought about it, before Hulaeg had appeared, they had actually been negotiating with the Tang people of the City of Steel for a very long time. But they had made no progress. And the other side had always refused to negotiate. If it had been a normal person, they could have just dispatched soldiers. But that youth from the City of Steel was not someone they could send soldiers to deal with. In truth, the deaths of the Black Wolf Yabgu and a good Elan in battle had already illustrated this problem. This had originally been a dead end, but with Hulaeg's arrival, the fourth prince really had returned. Not even Ishbara Khagan had expected this. A nobody has a use for a nobody. This insignificant nobody was able to save the fourth prince from the City of Steel and accomplish what we could not. Isn't that enough? Moreover, with an additional 100,000 warhorses, Khagan's losses will be limited, and the warhorses of the steppe will quickly multiply. But with a horse merchant like Hulaeg, Khagan will have an additional channel of communication with the Tang dynasty. In the future, who knows what use this passageway will be? The Blackwater shaman indifferently said. Ishbara Khagan pensively lowered his head, but he still couldn't help but sigh. But we are still somewhat unwilling. If Khagan is unwilling, it's very simple. We just need to wait a little longer. The Blackwater shaman smiled. His pitch-black eyes flickered with a faint light in the darkness of the night, seeming to contain a profound meaning. Reporting. At this moment, the voice of one of Ishbara Khagan's closest private wolf guards came from outside the tent. Great General Dewissely has come to report that he has already quelled the rebellion of Huyener's 7 tribes and defeated the rebel army supporting Huyener. In addition, he has also driven back the biting Protectorate army that wanted to take advantage of the chaos to advance north. Around noon tomorrow, he will arrive at Mount Sanmi to report. Ishbara Khagan's body trembled at these words, and he subconsciously turned to the Blackwater shaman at his side. The Blackwater shaman silently smiled. Time slowly passed. While Wang Chong was energetically preparing for Talas, and the region of Chishi was still peaceful, the tranquil imperial court was gradually beginning to grow tense. We can't delay any longer. More than 30 letters have arrived from Anshi requesting reinforcements, and Great General Gao Xianji is still trapped at Talas. The imperial court must send troops as quickly as possible. An official in Taiji Palace yelled, his voice vehement and impassioned. It's just a minor campaign, and Great General Gao Xianji hasn't lost yet. Chen Han, why are you in such a rush? Do you think that our Grand Tang dynasty can't beat a puny Arabia? Isn't Goguryeo also a tiny country? The Sui mobilized all of its strength, but didn't it still lose? Great General Zhang Shogui is invincible and invincible, but didn't he also stop there? Can the strength of one's military be measured by the size of a country? Great General Gao Xianji has always been skilled in quick battles, but after so long, there's still no news. If something happens, will you be able to take responsibility? Absurd. Does not having news for more than a month mean defeat? If the great general really was defeated, the news would have long since reached the imperial court. Do you not understand such a simple principle? Anxi, Qixi, and Longxi are like lips and teeth. And without the lips, the teeth will feel the cold. If Anxi is lost, Qixi will be lost. And if Qixi is lost, Longxi will be threatened. And then the safety of the capital will be threatened. If the Arabs, Uzan, or the Turks are allowed to march through Qixi and Longxi and reach the capital, it will be a disgrace to the entire Tang dynasty. All of you who are passionately opposing this today will be criminals of the Tang dynasty. I'd like to see just how you'll deal with this when the time comes. The debate in the imperial court was extremely intense. The matter of Talas had not yet reached this stage, and everyone believed that someone of Gao Xianji's abilities would be able to easily defeat the Arabs. After all, based on Gao Xianji's previous record, this war god of Anxi had never been defeated. But reality had developed in a completely different way from what they had imagined. The urgent letters from Anxi were getting more and more urgent, and the 30,000 elite soldiers of the Tang dynasty led by Gao Xianji, all of them armed to the teeth, were still trapped at Talas. If this was just a war on the border, it would have been fine, but this had never been the case. Anxi was the barrier to Qixi, Qixi was the barrier to Longxi, and Longxi was the barrier to the capital. The Tang dynasty had invaded the western regions and the 4 garrisons of Anxi for 2 reasons. One was to expand their territory and display the power of the Tang dynasty, and the other was to protect Longxi and the capital and protect the holy emperor of the Tang dynasty. Chapter 868. Alarmist Talk. The 4 garrisons of Anxi are just a tiny place on the border, and Talas is a city beyond the borders, tens of thousands of li from the capital. Are we going to mobilize all the strength of the entire country to reinforce Anxi every time Anxi is in danger? The western regions is a land beyond civilization, and there isn't a single citizen of the Tang dynasty. Are we going to exhaust the strength of the Tang dynasty for the sake of a group of people beyond civilization? Listening to the argument in the hall, Yang Lu finally couldn't help but shout. Yang Lu was an imperial censor of the imperial court, a typical civil official. Civil officials were all staunch opponents of war, and Anxi's request for reinforcements had been met with many voices in the imperial court, with Yang Lu being the loudest of them all. The military is a matter of national importance. An imperial great general and 30,000 of the empire's most elite soldiers are trapped in Talas. Can we just watch them die and do nothing? Does that mean that we can ignore all the emergency calls at the borders? If something happens and the people are plunged into misery and suffering, who will take responsibility? A titled general walked out from the ranks and said angrily, there was no need for the king of Song to appear at Talas. There had always been many voices in the imperial court advocating war. Whether it was the Sui dynasty, the Tang dynasty, or the previous dynasties, the struggle between civil and military officials had never ceased. The incident at Talas had also sharpened the relationship between the civil and military officials of the imperial court. The crux of the matter is that the War of the Southwest has only just concluded, and the protectorates are still recuperating. How can we send reinforcements in such a short time? The imperial court has always stationed its soldiers on the border. The capital and the interior have no soldiers. If we mobilize the soldiers of other protectorates, the consequences will be unthinkable if something happens. The current situation isn't that we're ignoring Anxi's request for reinforcements, but that we have no people, no soldiers to send. A relatively neutral official finally couldn't stand it any longer and spoke up. But he had barely finished speaking when a voice rang out in everyone's ears. Qixi Protectorate Wang Chong. His voice was low and contained a trace of timidity, as if he was worried about attracting too much attention. But as soon as this voice fell, the entire court hall suddenly fell silent. Even Yang Lu and the relatively neutral official were stunned and suddenly speechless. The 4 protectorates of Longxi, biting, Anong, and Annan had just been through a war and suffered heavy casualties. They could only defend passively and were powerless to attack. These 4 areas had the most soldiers, and they all had powerful enemies that needed to be dealt with. They truly couldn't spare any manpower, and they couldn't cross the Song Mountains to fight with the Arabs. But Wang Chong and the Qixi Protectorate were different. The Qixi Protectorate had always been the source of Anqi's reserve soldiers, and Wang Chong was Qixi's acting protector general. Of all the protectorates of the Tang dynasty, he was probably the only one who could mobilize troops to reinforce Anqi. Best of all, Qixi had always been threatened by both the Uzan and the Western Turks, and it had always been on the defensive. It rarely had the ability to attack, much less reinforce Anqi. But this was where the beauty of the situation lay. Not too long ago, Wang Chong had launched a series of attacks against both the Uzan and the Western Turks. The Battle of the Triangular Gap had neutralized the threat posed by the Uzan to Qixi, and the Battle of the Qixi Armory had neutralized the threat posed by the Western Turkic Khaganate to the east. The Qixi Protectorate was now in an unprecedented state of safety, with no soldiers capable of threatening it. And as the commanding general and acting protector general of the Qixi Protectorate, Wang Chong had long ago proven his ability in the War of the Southwest, and in the 2 campaigns in Qixi. In private, Wang Chong had long ago been hailed as the empire's 8th great general. There was no need to doubt his ability in the art of war, and he was completely capable of holding his own. If one wanted to reinforce Anqi and help Gao Xianji and the Anqi Protectorate army trapped at Talas, there was no one more suitable than Wang Chong and the Qixi Protectorate, and this would not have too great of an impact on the empire. At this moment, even Yang Lu and the other civil officials, who had always opposed war, were speechless, pensive looks on their faces. Bang! A jade seal landed on the document from the Bureau of Military Personnel, leaving a seal on it. After more than a month of debate, for the first time, the civil and military officials of the Tang dynasty had reached an agreement. Qixi Protector General Wang Chong was to lead the army to reinforce Talas. All the weapons, supplies, and soldiers needed were to be immediately reported to the imperial court, and the 6 bureaus were to cooperate with them with all their might. Just before dusk, a messenger bird flapped its wings, carrying the document from the Bureau of Military Personnel to Qixi. At this moment, everyone in the imperial court and the entire Tang dynasty was focused on Qixi, on Wang Chong. Whether they could reinforce Anqi and rescue Gao Xianji and the Anqi Protectorate army trapped at Talas would all depend on Wang Chong. Gazes swept across the earth, focusing on the distant city of steel in Wuxiang. Bang! A metallic clatter resounded through the skies, and with it, smoke from countless furnaces began to rise from every corner of the city of steel, soaring into the sky. If one looked down from the sky, they would see countless craftsmen in the city of steel, like ants in a swarm. Outside the city of steel, the sounds of fighting could be heard as tens of thousands of soldiers charged in a frenzied battle between friend and foe. These soldiers were not soldiers of the Tang dynasty, but eagle-nosed mercenaries of the western regions. After exterminating the Saka and recruiting the Gonka people, Wang Chong had used his remaining prestige to spend a great deal of money in the western regions. Using his vast wealth and the prestige of the Tang dynasty, Wang Chong had recruited many mercenaries from the western regions. At least 40,000 mercenaries of the western regions had come under Wang Chong's banner, and Wang Chong had trained them outside the city of steel. The mercenaries of the western regions had not undergone any rigorous military training, and in battle, they liked to charge forward in a disorderly fashion. This was not what Wang Chong needed. The Arabs were no ordinary foes, and these motley crew of mercenaries would find it very difficult to make much of an impact. Thus, Wang Chong had gathered them near the city of steel, and given them to Li Sai and Su Qi for training. The simplest formation and military training would completely transform these western regions' mercenaries, and they would be able to pose a threat to the Arabs in the future Battle of Talas. On the west side of the city of steel, on a massive training ground, massive ballistae were lined up in rows. Behind the ballistae were groups of 5 people, who were constantly knocking, aiming, calibrating, and firing. Boom, 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 boom. Ballista bolts rained down on the metal targets across from them. The metal targets were as thick as a finger, but in the face of these ballista bolts, they were like straw. Boom, boom, boom. Round after round, group after group. After each group had fired 100 shots, they would immediately switch to another group. During this entire process, everyone was completely focused, their expressions extremely serious. Wang Chong was using unprecedented speed to carry out his plan for the ballista teams. In normal circumstances, this would not have been possible in a short period of time. But the massive number of ballista bolts in the Qixi armory made Wang Chong's plan extremely convenient. Even further away, the sound of horse hooves could be heard. The sound was as heavy as thunder. War horses neighed, and the sound of their neighing could be heard. Li Sai and his 2,000 soldiers had already returned to the city of steel, and Cheng Sanyuan and his 3,000 Wuxian cavalry had also returned. The two groups immediately began their arduous training in the city of steel. This was a completely new formation. With the Battle of Talas imminent, everyone knew that they would be facing an opponent that not even the war god of the western regions, Gao Xianji, had been able to deal with. An even more powerful formation was needed to defeat them. In the center of the city of steel, there was an ancient-style building with arched eaves. A window by the railing was open, revealing a handsome youth with sword-like eyebrows, starry eyes, and a confident yet composed youth silently flipping through a book. Flapping, a messenger pigeon suddenly descended from the sky, piercing through the window like a sharp sword, and landing on the desk in front of Wang Chong. Wang Chong's eyes flashed as he looked at the messenger pigeon. He undid the bindings on his leg and glanced at the letter inside. But this glance caused Wang Chong's expression to change, and a smile slowly appeared on his face. It's finally here. Wang Chong put down the book, his lips slowly curling into a smile. After such a long period of time, after a long debate, the imperial court finally came to a conclusion and gave him the power to decide life and death, as well as the power to recruit soldiers. This was exactly what Wang Chong had hoped for. Wang Chong had never hoped that the imperial court would understand the significance of this war to the Tang dynasty as he did. But if he could obtain this military order, everything would be different. At the very least, he would be able to act as he pleased. Speed is of the essence in war. There's not much time left, but there should be enough time for me to do a few things. Wang Chong quietly said to himself, as he looked at the document from the Bureau of Military Personnel. The authority given to him by the Bureau of Military Personnel was enormous. All soldiers, money, and resources were at Wang Chong's disposal. This was something that no protector general or great general had ever enjoyed. But Wang Chong also understood that this sort of authority had its limits. The fact that the imperial court had given him this authority meant that the assistance it could provide was extremely limited. In truth, the imperial court hoped that he could resolve this crisis on his own, not actually give him a large number of soldiers. This lowly subject Wang Chong receives the order, but this lowly subject has several requests that the imperial court can agree to. Chapter 869. Moreover, Li Jingyi had led 40,000 soldiers to reinforce the southwest, but they had been ambushed by the Uzan, consuming the small number of soldiers that the Tang dynasty had managed to accumulate with great difficulty. The imperial court could only send a limited number of soldiers. At this moment, Wang Chong very naturally thought of his father and big brother. Father and big brother should have around 20,000 soldiers on both sides. Although they are infantry, they are experienced soldiers tempered through blood and fire. Their defense is extremely formidable. They should have been able to play a role in the Battle of Talas and the war with the Arabs. But this is still not enough. These soldiers are far from enough to deal with the soldiers of the Arabian Empire. Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil as he recalled the information from his last life about the Battle of Talas. In the battle between Gao Xianji and Abu Muslim, the Arabs had gathered at least 300,000 soldiers. The Arabs were even more vicious and skilled in battle than the Uzun. The soldiers of Qixi were far from enough. The soldiers of the imperial court that haven't experienced any major battles are useless. Bringing these recruits is just sending them to their deaths. And the places where the Tang dynasty has the most soldiers are the border protectorates. Zhang Shogui and I have clashed, so he definitely won't help me. Moreover, transferring soldiers is too far away, and Yuzhou is truly too far. Even if Insishun can help biting, he'll definitely find an excuse. As for Lengxi, Geshu Han doesn't even have enough soldiers, so he probably won't be able to take care of himself. Asking him to help me is just wishful thinking. At this time, the only place that can send soldiers is the Annan Protectorate. I've already destroyed the Ngari royal lineage, and the Mengxizhao Empire has already submitted to the Tang dynasty. The Annan Protectorate is truly no longer a threat. Wang Chong thought for a few moments before writing down the name of the Annan Protectorate. This was the only thing he could think of in this short amount of time. Soldiers were necessary, but as for weapons and food, Wang Chong already had the hybrid rice of the Qixi Armory in Jiaoji, so he didn't need the imperial court's help. What they really needed the most was gold and silver. War was a war of wealth, and what was consumed the most was gold and silver. Moreover, with these things Wang Chong could recruit more mercenaries. This was also the most practical method in a short period of time. Wang Chong added one name after another. Once he was done, Wang Chong stood up and rolled up the letter. Just as he was about to place it back into the bamboo tube, thunderous cheers came from outside the city of steel. Wang Chong, come quickly. Your second brother Wang Bei is here. Suddenly, Su Yiqin's voice came from the distant walls of the city of steel. What? When Wang Chong heard this, his body shook violently. He couldn't believe his ears. Swoosh. Putting down the letter, Wang Chong flew through the window and out. A few moments later, a sea of people had gathered outside the city gate. Countless people were surging along the cement road leading to Wuxiang. These people had fierce faces and were dressed in completely different clothes. They were actually bandits and highwaymen, let alone others. Even Wang Chong was dumbfounded by this sight. But very quickly, Wang Chong's attention was drawn to a cold and aloof figure at the very front of these bandits and highwaymen. Second brother. Wang Chong rejoiced and immediately flew over. The two brothers fiercely hugged each other. Little brother, I'm here, Wang Bei indifferently said. Wang Bei said indifferently. His expression was cold, and there wasn't much change on his face. However, his eyes, which usually kept people at arm's length, revealed traces of warmth. Wang Chong's second brother Wang Bei had suppressed his berserker syndrome and walked out of the prison of the imperial palace. Moreover, on his way from the capital to Wuxiang, he had subdued a large number of bandits and highwaymen, giving Wang Chong 8,000 to 9,000 soldiers. No one had expected this, and the morale of the soldiers in the city of Steel soared. And the arrival of Wang Chong's second brother Wang Bei was like a primer. Soldiers began to pour in from all directions. The first to arrive were those from Deflecting Blade Manor. Su Hanshan had brought Sun Jiming, Fang Xianying Su Gan, Chen Burang, Zhuang Buping and Qi Weisi. These future generals of Deflecting Blade Manor had been dispatched by Wang Chong to the southwest, biting, and other places to temper themselves. Tempered by blood and fire, all of them had made significant progress. And soon after, Wang Chong's request was approved. Wang Chong's father Wang Yan and big brother Wang Fu rushed to the Qixi Protectorate headquarters as quickly as possible. Wang Chong had prepared a large number of transport carriages in the capital to transport these 20,000 soldiers, so as to shorten the time. On the other side, Annan Protector General Xin Yuzhongtong had received Wang Chong's request and sent 8,000 elites of the Annan Protectorate to Wuxiang. 4,000 of them were elite cavalry. If not for the special rules of the various protectorates, Xin Yuzhongtong would have sent even more soldiers to Wang Chong. Xin Yuzhongtong and Wang Chong had forged a friendship that had been tempered through blood and fire, through life and death. Not only that, even though the imperial court was strapped for soldiers and could not mobilize many, the imperial court had still sent an additional 10,000 soldiers to Wang Chong. Together with Wang Chong's father and big brother, the Annam Protectorate of the Southwest. They were all sent to Wuxiang. In addition, the greatest aid the imperial court had given Wang Chong was money. The imperial court had given Wang Chong 10 million taels of gold, of which 5 million were in gold yuan notes. This was enough money for Wang Chong to hire a large number of soldiers in the western regions. Time slowly passed, and every day, a large number of soldiers would arrive at Wuxiang City of Steel. Wang Chong was doing his utmost to race against time, sending countless carrier pigeons and rock eagles to Talas each day to gather intelligence. At the same time, Wang Chong was also using the 10 million taels of gold the imperial court had given him to recruit soldiers and increase his own strength. He had even used this gold to hire 12,000 regular soldiers from Greater and Lesser Balor. Now all I need is the meteoric metal. In the city of steel of Wuxiang, in Wang Chong's residence, Wang Chong mentally sighed as he looked out the window at the plum blossoms that were about to bloom. The Qixi Protectorate was now fully prepared, and all that was missing was the meteoric metal. Wang Chong had done a great deal of preparation. Soldiers, food, Wuxia steel weapons. Everything that could be done, Wang Chong had done. But deep in Wang Chong's heart, there was still one deep regret: the meteoric metal. Even someone as powerful as Wang Chong, who had the memories of his past life after his reincarnation, could not control some things, and the meteoric metal was one of them. His cousin Wang Liang had gone overseas to search for the meteoric metal for a very long time. Logically speaking, he should have returned long ago, but for some reason, there had been no news. I wonder how he's doing right now, Wang Chong quietly said to himself. But not even Wang Chong knew that on the other side of the eastern coast of the Tang dynasty, an unprecedentedly powerful fleet of ships was currently arriving. Out of the way, out of the way! The fleet is about to enter the harbor. Heavens, whose fleet is this? Why is the waterline so deep? Just how much cargo are they carrying? Can't you see? You don't even recognize the flag of the Wang clan? How ignorant! Ah, young Marquis. The craftsman on the docks looked in shock at that massive ship, which was several stories tall, and began to back up. Clap! At almost the same time, the first ship docked. A long rope ladder was thrown down from the ship, and one crew member after another, their skin tanned by the wind, slid down the rope ladder. As they looked at the familiar central plains, they spread open their arms and laughed. We finally returned. Following closely behind these crew members was a long wooden plank reinforced with steel plates. Amidst the sounds of machinery, it was erected high up from the ship, and then with a loud boom, it fell down like a golden mountain and jade pillar. After a few moments of silence, a thin but extremely capable figure appeared on the other end of the wooden bridge. He was dressed in a shabby embroidered robe, but he still retained the elegance of a scion of a great clan. His long years of drifting on the sea had darkened his skin, and his face was marked by many hardships. But his eyes were unprecedentedly bright, brimming with vitality and prestige. After more than half a year, I finally returned to the Central Plains. Wang Liang stood at the end of the wooden bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed into the distance. The strong sea breeze caused his hair to dance in the wind. Wang Liang's aura was steady and heavy, like that of an experienced veteran who had sailed the sea for decades. And it was hard to believe that he was actually just a young man of 21 or 22. From top to bottom, the Wang clan is bound together for glory and bound together for loss. Cousin, I hope that I haven't dragged you down. The trials of life, the trials of the sea, and the considerations of life and death had long ago made Wang Liang understand many truths that a young man like him should not understand. And he also understood the true essence of this colossal clan of ministers and generals. Great clans had their own responsibilities, and each person had their own distinct authority. Only then could they maintain the operation of this colossal clan and prevent it from falling apart. In the current Wang clan, the spearhead was Wang Chong. He was the most dazzling existence of this generation of the Wang clan. And he was also the crux of the Wang clan's glory. He was irreplaceable, and Wang Liang himself was the end of this spear, the handle. Although each person's role was different, it was all the same. Wang Liang did not understand military affairs, nor did he understand Wang Chong's ambitions and plans. Thus, he could only use his own method to support Wang Chong, his cousin, and the entire Wang clan. As these thoughts flitted through his mind, Wang Liang quickly regained his composure. His entire demeanor was like an unsheathed sword, gradually becoming sharp and brimming with prestige. Turning around, Wang Liang waved his hand behind him as he sternly shouted, "Begin unloading!" Chapter 870. Wang Chong's foresight was truly astonishing. Wang Liang still had no idea that he had never left his home, never sailed the sea, never even seen a seagull. How could he have known that there was so much meteoric metal exposed on an island several thousand li away? This point was truly miraculous, and at the same time puzzling. But even so, there was one thing that Wang Liang was certain of. The meteoric metal exposed on those islands was far too precious. Just the thought of so much meteoric metal exposed on those undiscovered islands on his way back was unbearable to Wang Liang. And there was no telling when those clans with ulterior motives would take it away. Thus, after careful calculations, Wang Liang had changed the waterline of the fleet, greatly increasing the ship's capacity. Wang Liang had used a single trip to transport the goods that would have required at least 2 trips. This was also the true reason why his fleet had only reached the Tang dynasty of the Central Plains so long behind schedule. Roar! The call of the fleet resounded through the docks, and then the crew, working together from inside and outside, began to hurriedly unload the goods. Bang! When the news that Wang Liang had brought the meteoric metal to the Central Plains was sent by a carrier pigeon to Wuxia, the entire city of steel was abuzz with excitement. The final part of Wang Chong's plan had finally been completed. With the meteoric metal, Wang Chong could forge a large quantity of indestructible armor, and the last weakness of Wuxia's cavalry would be completely repaired. Pass on my order. Have all the great clans of the capital work together to transport the meteoric metal to the city of steel, as quickly as possible day and night. Time is of the essence, so the forging of the meteoric metal need not be done in the capital. It will all be done in the city of steel. In the city of steel, in Wang Chong's residence, Wang Chong was invigorated by Wang Liang's news. An eagle flew through the window like an arrow, vanishing in the direction of the capital. Following Wang Chong's order, the cement road from the capital to Wuxiang was suddenly filled with countless specially made carriages. These carriages were loaded with small mountains of meteoric metal as they traveled day and night to the city of steel. Along the way, they were escorted by countless cavalrymen. On the Silk Road, there were also countless bandits and horse bandits. They were not there to rob, but to protect the meteorites. Wang Chong's second brother, Wang Bei, had subdued a large number of mountain bandits and horse bandits on his journey to the west. At this moment, he was finally showing his worth. At this moment, Wang Chong's plan was finally complete. The city of steel was like an invisible vortex, into which countless resources, steel, and soldiers were surging. Roar! Ha! The sounds of the army training continued day and night, echoing into the heavens. With the city of steel as the center, 60,000 mercenaries from the tribes of the western regions, 8,000 Gonka people, and 12,000 regular soldiers from Greater and Lesser Baler had been gathered in the region of Qixi. In addition, the Tang dynasty had gathered 20,000 soldiers from the Qixi Protectorate, 5,000 fully armored Wuxiang cavalry, 20,000 elite infantry, and cavalry led by Wang Chong's father Wang Yan and big brother Wang Fu, 8,000 elites from the Annam Protectorate, who had fought in the War of the Southwest, and 10,000 regular soldiers sent by the imperial court. An army of 143,000 was gathered in the city of steel. In addition, Wang Chong had used the 10 million taels of gold given to him by the imperial court to buy large amounts of cattle and sheep from the tribes of the western regions to replenish his supplies. In addition, all kinds of provisions, armaments, and steel modules were piled high in the city of steel. The city of steel had become a true war machine. At this moment, even the people of Uzan in the distant western regions could sense the thick aura of war in the city of steel. A battle was about to begin. Time slowly passed, and the time for the army to depart got closer and closer. Meanwhile, from Qixi beyond Anxi, past the Tsong Mountains, 700 to 800 li, one could see the distant city of Talas. This famous fortress of the Silk Road was now surrounded by a dense mass of cavalry and infantry. Countless cavalry and infantry formed an endless flood of steel that surrounded the city of Talas, so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. The army was silent and did not make a single sound. The oppressive atmosphere was suffocating. "My lord, today is the 7th time the Arabs have attacked. It's been almost 2 months. But not only have their numbers not decreased, they've only increased. It seems like there's no way to kill them all. The soldiers won't be able to hold on for much longer." The magnificent walls of Talas were famous throughout the western regions. But at this moment, they were covered in smoke and fire. The walls were crisscrossed with scars of battle, and on the walls, a stalwart general stood next to Gao Xianji, a look of deep concern and unease on his face. "I understand," Gao Xianji indifferently said, his long hair fluttering in the wind. His expression was cold and aloof as he stared down at the vast sea of Arab soldiers. After nearly 2 months, Gao Xianji's face was covered in frost. If they hadn't seen it for themselves, no one would have believed that this was that handsome and refined war god of the western regions, who had claimed to be invincible and undefeatable in every battle. As the most famous great general of the Tang dynasty's northwestern border, and one of the strongest warriors of the Central Plains, the peak Saint Marshal Gao Xianji had slain countless powerful foes. Even after this fierce battle, Gao Xianji's clothes were not stained by a single drop of blood. In this world, the number of people that could threaten an imperial great general like Gao Xianji could be counted on one hand. But now, not only were Gao Xianji's hair and clothes stained with blood, even the breastplate protecting his chest had been shattered. The nearly indestructible cloud-swallowing divine armor that had been bestowed by the Holy Emperor had been struck by an even sharper weapon, leaving behind countless cracks and fissures. And dark red blood was flowing out of these cracks. If even the commander-in-chief of the army, Gao Xianji, was in such a state, one could easily imagine the intensity and cruelty of the battle that the Anxi Protectorate army had experienced in these last 2 months. In his 10-some years of campaigning and defeating countless foes, Gao Xianji had never imagined that here, to the west of the Tsong Mountains, he would encounter the strongest foe he had ever encountered in his life, Abu Muslim and his Arab army. "What are the casualties of today's army?" Gao Xianji's voice resounded over the walls, making it impossible to sense the slightest emotion in his voice. "All kinds of armaments have been damaged, and all our ballistae have been used up. In addition, the Furgan tribe has lost 8,000 soldiers, the Karluks 6,000, and we have lost 6,000. Of our 70,000 soldiers, only 30,000 remain. In addition, a considerable number are wounded. My lord, we won't be able to last much longer. We need reinforcements." The general anxiously said. "Is there still no news from Anxi?" Gao Xianji calmly said. "Yes." The burly general clenched his teeth. "In the last 2 months, we've been constantly requesting reinforcements from Anxi, sending letters like snowflakes every day. General Feng has replied that he's already doing his utmost to request reinforcements from the imperial court. But even now, no reinforcements have arrived. My lord, your subordinate will write another letter to General Feng and press for news." "There's no need." To the general's surprise, Gao Xianji waved his hand and refused. "My lord." Hearing this, the general was dumbfounded, and he was completely dumbfounded. "Pass on my order. Starting today, there's no need to send any more letters requesting reinforcements, because we have no more soldiers to use," Gao Xianji indifferently said. Hearing this, the subordinate next to him was dumbfounded, unable to say a word. Gao Xianji said nothing, but a complicated look flitted through his eyes. His gaze slowly swept over the earth, into the endless distance. Gao Xianji knew that he had made a mistake. In truth, they had already lost this battle, and the Anxi Protectorate army had no hope left to speak of. He had always advocated a quick and decisive battle. And in this battle, whether it was the attack on the Sher Kingdom or the assault on the city of Talas, Gao Xianji had believed that his strategy had been flawless. His only mistake had been underestimating his opponent. A mountain cannot hold two tigers. I didn't think that there would be an opponent as powerful as the Tang dynasty on this continent. Gao Xianji's mind was in turmoil. The Tang dynasty was the strongest empire in the world. Whether it was Goguryeo, the Turks, the Uzan, or the kingdoms of the western regions, none of them could contend against it. This was a belief that had been deeply ingrained in Gao Xianji's mind. In his many years of campaigning in the western regions, this belief had never changed. As an imperial great general and Anxi protector general, Gao Xianji had once investigated Arabia, and he was well aware that Arabia was far stronger than the other kingdoms of the western regions. It was his strongest opponent in the western regions. Gao Xianji had never underestimated Arabia, but only when he truly clashed with them on the battlefield did Gao Xianji truly understand just how powerful his opponent was. From 200,000 soldiers at the start, it had grown to more than 300,000, and this number was still growing, as if it would never end. This opponent was far more terrifying and powerful than he had imagined. This was not an opponent that was just a little stronger than the kingdoms of the western regions, or on par with the Uzan Empire. This was a colossus that was just as terrifying as the Tang dynasty. Defeating such a powerful opponent was not something that the Anxi Protectorate could do. At the start of the 2-month stalemate, Gao Xianji had hoped that he could rely on his superior equipment and the sturdiness of the city of Talas to resist the Arab assault and finally receive reinforcements from the imperial court. But now Gao Xianji was beginning to understand that this was impossible. The Tang dynasty had no soldiers to use. Longxi, Baiting, Annan, Anong. As the Anxi Protector General, no one understood better than him what sort of opponents these four regions faced. The Arabs were too fortunate, because they simply didn't have that many opponents. And the Tang dynasty was too unfortunate, because it had far too many opponents around it. The Tang dynasty had hundreds of thousands of soldiers, but because it was surrounded by so many enemies, it couldn't muster many people. Feng Chongqing had truly sent a letter saying that the imperial court had agreed to send troops as soon as possible. But Gao Xianji understood that this was just empty talk. The imperial court had no soldiers to fear. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.